Mastering the Lightning of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyright or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Christmas Gift. Without evidence, it is better not to suspect others at will. Now we should think about how to deal with what is going to happen next. Dumbledore narrowed his eyes and said as he thought. Emmeline Vance listened to everyone's speculation silently, and said at this time, "What do you think, Professor Dumbledore? The points that need to be guarded are too loose, and the Ministry of Magic will not have many people at the time." Dumbledore looked at Hidden Prewed as if he had thought something clearly, and said, "In this way, I will persuade the Longbottoms to spend Christmas with the Potters. I will also ask Marlene what she thinks. Maybe spending Christmas together at the Burrow is also a good choice." Hidden Prewed smiled and said gently, "I think Molly will definitely welcome them warmly. Well, this means that there are 2 points that need to be guarded, so we can even ambush around in advance. It's better for them to show up. If they dare to let me blow in the cold wind all night, I will not let them go." Mad-Eye Moody said after a laugh. "That's fine, but it's better not to explain the reason for this arrangement in advance. Maybe we have a chance to inflict heavy damage on the Death Eaters this time, and maybe we can even take the opportunity to catch the traitor." Edgar Bones also agreed with this arrangement and nodded. Dumbledore saw that everyone could accept his arrangement, and nodded and said, "Then it's decided. Moody, Emmeline, please take care of the Potters and the Longbottoms. Edgar, I'll leave the Weasleys to you. I will be on the sidelines at any time to prevent the Dark Lord himself from showing up." The rest of the people nodded in agreement, and then stood up and left. Dumbledore stayed where he was, as if thinking of the prophecy he heard a few months ago. He muttered thoughtfully, "Tom, can you really do this to a newborn baby? What a terrible abyss your heart has fallen into." Dumbledore was not only sure that the Death Eaters would launch an attack this Christmas, but he had even guessed who the main target of the attack would be. However, he still muttered in confusion, "Which one is it? Potter or Longbottom? Snappy, I hope he won't let me down at the critical moment." On the other side, after Cyrus brought Anduin back home, he sat heavily on a sofa, with his hands under his head, shaking his feet in confusion, probably still worried about the Death Eaters. Anduin didn't take it to heart. He still had confidence in Dumbledore. Under the condition of being prepared, he didn't worry about anything happening. "Cyrus, I'm going out for a while," Anduin said to Cyrus, who was lying on the sofa. When Cyrus heard this, he still wanted to go out at this time and hurriedly said, "Where are you going? It's too late to stay here at a time like this. What if we encounter danger if we go out?" Anduin rolled his eyes, wondering why this guy was so neurotic, and said, "I have to buy some Christmas gifts. Besides, I'm not a member of the Order of the Phoenix. And don't be too nervous. If the Death Eaters really want to attack on Christmas, it proves that it is safe before Christmas." Cyrus was still worried and said, "You're a child and you are still thinking about celebrating Christmas. Maybe Dumbledore will ask us to cancel the party directly. Don't make trouble. Then maybe the Death Eaters know that we are prepared for Christmas, so it is possible that they will cancel the attack directly. Besides, I won't go to places like Diagon Alley where wizards gather. I'm going to the Muggle Business District. Don't worry," Anduin advised Cyrus. Seeing that Anduin was determined, Cyrus had no choice but to say, "Okay, but I have to follow you. Don't run around." As a result, Cyrus followed Anduin reluctantly. The reason why Anduin was going to the Muggle Business District to buy gifts was actually mainly to save money. He had a lot of Muggle currency, but wizard currency was used sparingly, so he had to use it sparingly. First, Anduin took Cyrus to London's Chinatown. He had to buy more Chinese food seasonings. After all, Hagrid was such a big eater that a box of seasonings was almost finished in a few months. It was a pity that it was winter now, otherwise he would have bought some seedlings to plant in Hagrid's vegetable garden. At the same time, he also bought a big copper pot, the copper hot pot that LBJ used for shabu mutton. Anduin was going to find an opportunity to have a hot pot. It would be a pity not to have hot pot in the winter. After that, he went to the nearby mall to buy gifts. He bought a lot of children's storybooks according to Vivian's words, and also bought an exquisite music box, which could play beautiful lullabies as long as it was opened. The inside of the lid of the music box could also be pressed with a photo. He also chose a brooch with a lion engraved on it for Professor McGonagall, and bought an exquisite mechanical clock for Professor Flitwick. There should be no such thing as giving a clock as a gift in the UK. He bought a bottle of aged whiskey for Dean Slughorn, knowing that the Dean liked to enjoy himself. As for Hagrid, Anduin found a large copper cup engraved with various monsters. It was sold as a handicraft, but if it was given to Hagrid, he would probably really use it. As for Charles and Vivian, Anduin gave each of them a new set of mahjong tiles, which saved them from borrowing from each other. According to Vivian, the mahjong tiles he lent out were often circulated between Slytherin and Gryffindor. As for Cyrus, Anduin bought a phonograph on the spot, and did not even pack it, ready to take it back and use it directly. He also bought a lot of vinyl records, by the way. Anduin thought this was very suitable for Cyrus. With his bad temper, it was necessary to use music to soothe his mood occasionally. At the same time, Anduin also bought a lot of greeting cards, wrapping paper, packaging boxes, etc. Ready to go back and pack some joy potions to give to other guests at the party. Anduin also bought a dress and a suit for himself. Anduin found that it was quite useful to bring Cyrus out. It would be great to have someone to help carry things. Cyrus was irritable and hugged a large cardboard box full of gifts. He cursed and walked out of the mall with Anduin. In the next few days, Anduin stayed obediently at Cyrus's house. Every day, Cyrus was either missing, lying in the living room, or fiddling with the phonograph Anduin bought for him like a big man picking his feet. During this period, Anduin also asked Cyrus about the secret of communicating through the fireplace. It turned out that it was the same principle as flood powder, that is, connecting various fireplaces through the flood network. The fireplace in Cyrus's house was specially opened with a small communication network belonging to the Order of the Phoenix. It could not be moved directly with flood powder, but real-time communication was possible. Chapter 52 Christmas Dinner. Seeing Anduin was so interested, Cyrus gave him a book called Application of Contact Rooms as a Christmas gift. There are many technologies for laying the flood network that can be found in the book. Anduin felt like he had found a treasure after reading it. Recently, Anduin is learning ancient rooms and runes. There are many contents in this book for Anduin to practice and learn. So this is Snape. Anduin was flipping through an album of Cyrus's. There was a group photo of his class in it. It didn't look like a graduation photo, but rather a photo taken at some event. Yes, this was taken in Professor Slughorn's Slug Club. Look, this is Avery, this is Dolores, and this is Snape. You have to remember their appearance and be careful not to run into them in the future. Cyrus introduced the characters in detail to Anduin. Anduin was most concerned about Snape. He had a senior potion textbook signed by the Half-Blood Prince. When he found a God of War spell on it, Anduin was basically sure that the Half-Blood Prince was Snape. And judging from the notes in the book, Snape must have a strong foundation in potion learning. Snape in the photo was very young, with black hair slightly longer than Anduin's now, and a melancholy look with a little calmness. It was hard to imagine what such a person would look like when he smiled. The next day was time to attend the Christmas dinner. Anduin wore light grey slim-fit trousers, a French ink-coloured shirt on his upper body, a silver grey short pile Western-style vest on the outside, a narrow tie with bright silver and black stripes on his collar, and a tight-fitting long pile coat of the same light grey on the outside. His hair was also carefully groomed. The whole person looked energetic. If you ignore his height of about 1.5 meters, he looks like an adult gentleman. On the other side, Cyrus was also wearing a formal suit, but he didn't wear a tie. Instead, he unbuttoned the collar, looking like a handsome gangster uncle. So you told me that I have to go to the party on your broken motorcycle. Anduin originally thought that he and Cyrus would visit the Potter family through apparition or flood network, but when he saw him pushing his motorcycle in a pretentious manner, he knew he was wrong. Ha! I have to let Potter and Lupin see my little baby. Don't worry, my suitcase is cast with a traceless extension spell, so it can hold all your gifts. Cyrus laughed and stroked his precious motorcycle, almost making Anduin sick. Anduin could only sit on the truck bed helplessly, muttering in his heart, I have managed my hair with great difficulty. It doesn't matter if you have messy hair, but if you blow my hair into a mess, I will not forgive you. So Cyrus drove Anduin into the sky and headed for Godric's Hollow. In the air, Anduin kept using barrier spells in front of him to resist the cold wind and protect his hair. Godric's Hollow is located in the southwest of the United Kingdom. It is a semi-wizard gathering place. There are many semi-wizard gathering places like this in the United Kingdom where wizards live. In the United Kingdom, Hogsmeade is the only wizard village composed entirely of wizards. Although there are many wizards living here, they still cannot use magic openly in front of other Muggle residents. Cyrus drove the motorcycle carrying Anduin to the street in front of a large house, then lifted the car's concealment magic and parked the car in the open space next to the house with a smile. But Anduin couldn't laugh at this time. Although he tried his best to protect it along the way, the cold wind was still inevitable, messing up his neatly combed hair. Now he could only try his best to smooth his hair back with his hands, and it turned into a shawl hairstyle again. Anduin stared at Cyrus with dissatisfaction and resentment. Cyrus just shrugged indifferently and said with a smile, "Don't mess with your hair anymore. Look at your current hairstyle, isn't it good? Like me, unrestrained and romantic. I just don't want to be like you, so I deliberately, forget it, I won't say more, it's all tears." Cyrus and Anduin knocked on the door of the Potter's house. The door opened and Lily appeared in front of them with long crimson hair. As soon as they met, she smiled and said to them, "Welcome, Cyrus, Anduin, you are late. Everyone else is here." That's right. If Cyrus hadn't insisted on riding his broken car, they wouldn't have wasted so much time on the road. Anduin couldn't help but glance at Cyrus with resentment. "Ha, it doesn't matter whether you arrive early or late. Long time no see, Lily. You are getting more and more beautiful now," Cyrus said indifferently. Anduin also politely replied, "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Potter, thank you for inviting me to your dinner." Lily looked at Anduin with a gentle smile and said, "You should call me Lily. I felt that I was very compatible with you when we first met. Besides, you saved Cyrus, so you are naturally our friend. Come in and warm yourself by the fire. It's very cold outside now. Can you stop saying that this kid saved me? If this kid hadn't suddenly appeared, I would have knocked down those two idiots long ago," Cyrus said with a little dissatisfaction. Lily didn't refute it after hearing it, but smiled at Anduin, and then led the two into the room. The Potter family's decoration is very warm. Under the neat magic candles and oil lamps, the house is very bright. There are already a group of people sitting in the living room, including James Potter, who I had met before. Next to him is a young man in old-fashioned suits and a short and fat young man. Opposite them sat a couple who looked like a couple. One of them was Frank Longbottom, whom Anduin had met before. He used to be responsible for sending him to the Leaky Cauldron in Nocturne Alley. Anduin remembered that he was an Auror, so the one next to him must be his wife. "James, Remus, Peter, Merry Christmas." Cyrus opened his arms as soon as he came in, and hugged and greeted the friends in front of him one by one. "Frank and Alice, I didn't expect you to come too. It's really lively today." Cyrus was also very happy to greet the Longbottom couple. When the Longbottom couple saw Cyrus again, they also happily stood up and shook hands with Cyrus. Frank Longbottom then said, "Dumbledore suggested that our two families spend this Christmas together. Harry and Neville were born one day apart, so it's just right for the two little guys to play together. Alice and my mother also thought this suggestion was great, so we came together." Chapter 53 Little Harry and Little Neville. When Cyrus heard that it was Dumbledore's suggestion, he and Anduin looked at each other and nodded. It seemed that this was Dumbledore's arrangement, and he must have been prepared. If nothing happened, that would be the best, but if the Death Eaters dared to come and join in the fun, Dumbledore and the Phoenix Society would give them a unique Christmas gift. James Potter seemed very happy today. He looked at Anduin beside him and smiled, "Merry Christmas, Anduin, I didn't expect to see you again so soon. I heard that you saved Cyrus. Cyrus was almost in danger. Lily and I were scared. I didn't expect him to be lucky enough to meet a little hero to help him." Frank Longbottom on the side also interrupted with a smile, "Yeah, I was also at the scene. I heard that Anduin even knocked down a Death Eater. Anduin, I don't know if you still remember me. Anyway, Merry Christmas." Cyrus became unhappy again when he heard them mention this. Ever since the chase in Nocturne Alley, his friends have been making fun of him about this. He is now almost suffering from little wizard PTSD. Ahem. Cyrus coughed twice, changed the subject, and said, "Look, I haven't had time to introduce you. This is Anduin Wilson, who is now a first-year student at Hogwarts." Then he said to Anduin, "Let me introduce you. This tall man is Remus Lupin, this fat man is Peter Pettigrew, you have met James, and the other two are Frank and Alice Longbottom. Hello, Anduin, thank you for helping Cyrus. This is the tall Lupin. Hello, nice to meet you." The one who was a little timid was Peter Pettigrew. Anduin nodded politely to everyone, and everyone also greeted Anduin politely. At this time, a middle-aged woman walked out of the kitchen, put her hands on her hips and shouted to everyone angrily. "Okay, are you guys ready to eat Christmas dinner? Come in and help. Are you only going to let an old man like me run around?" Frank Longbottom couldn't help but complain when he saw this. "Mom, you are less than 50 years old, don't talk about being old." Augusta Longbottom, Frank's mother, glared at his son and said, "Who made my son such a troublesome guy like you?" Seeing this, Anduin stepped forward to smooth things over and said, "Mrs. Longbottom, you have worked hard, let me help you." Augusta saw Anduin taking off his coat and rolling up his sleeves neatly, and couldn't help but yell at her son again. "Look at him, a child is more sensible than you." She turned to Anduin and said gently, "Thank you, child, but let us adults prepare dinner, otherwise you'll get burned." Frank Longbottom had to shrink his head when he heard his mother's roar and stuck out his tongue in embarrassment. Cyrus on the side said to Augusta, "Mrs. Longbottom, don't underestimate Anduin. His cooking skills are excellent. I feel like I have gained a lot of weight these days after eating the meals Anduin cooked for me." Augusta looked at Anduin in surprise when she heard what Cyrus said, and then she didn't hesitate and led Anduin into the kitchen swiftly. Lily was the only one busy in the kitchen now. Anduin put on an apron and began to process the ingredients skillfully. Augusta couldn't help but admire him and said, "I didn't expect you to be so sensible at such a young age. You can even cook." Anduin smiled reservedly, his hands constantly moving as he replied, "I have lived alone since I was a child, so I must learn to take care of myself." Augusta touched Anduin's head distressed and said, "Poor child, you must have suffered a lot. It's a pity that you were not born in our family, otherwise we would never let you suffer." Anduin was very moved to see Augusta's sudden overflow of maternal love, and said to Augusta, "Mrs. Longbottom, thank you for your kindness. Your son is also a brave man. I believe you will both be happy." Augusta also smiled with relief. Although she was so strict with her son all day long, Frank had always been the pride in her heart. Anduin seemed to have thought of something, and turned to Lily and said, "Lily, did Dumbledore tell you about that thing?" Lily understood what Anduin meant after hearing what he said, and replied, "Well, we all received the warning. James and I have been using protective magic to reinforce our residence these days, and I believe Professor Dumbledore must have made some arrangements. I heard that it was you who gave us the warning this time, and I haven't thanked you properly yet." Augusta also smiled proudly and said, "Dumbledore is still very trustworthy. If those Death Eaters want to kill us, don't show up in front of us." After Anduin heard what they said, he felt relieved. He had always had a suspicion in his heart, that is, whether there was someone in the Order of the Phoenix providing information to the Death Eaters. If nothing happened today, it was very likely that someone tipped off the Death Eaters and asked them to cancel the action, so today might really be calm. After coming up with a certain idea, Anduin stopped struggling and helped in the kitchen of ease. He also used the ingredients in the kitchen to make 2 dishes, a Western-style mushroom soup and a spicy tuna cake. After trying the dishes, Augusta's eyes lit up. She had only known Anduin for a short time, but she looked at Anduin with more and more love. When everything was almost ready, Anduin left the kitchen first. Several people in the living room gathered together, watching the 2 babies crawling on the ground. Anduin also came over, but he couldn't tell who was who. A group of evil adults around them put the 2 of them on the carpet, trying to get the 2 children to try a race, or a crawling race, but the 2 young wizards didn't give them face at all. One crawled 2 steps and sat up to suck his fingers, and the other went left and right, and finally crawled back. One of them is Harry, who killed Voldemort. When he was still a baby, there was nothing special about him. Anduin never knew the content of the original Harry Potter book, and he didn't even know if his appearance would save Lily from Voldemort's murder. If possible, Anduin wanted to save the tragedy of the Potter family, but he really didn't know how to do it. Was it because of carelessness that Voldemort found the opportunity to kill him? Or was there some other reason? Chapter 54 Group Photo. While Anduin was still worried, the group of people who were watching the children seemed to have had enough fun. Cyrus saw Anduin coming out, hugged the child and said to him with a smile, "Hey, look, this is my godson, Harry." Then he moved Harry close to Anduin, and said to the ignorant Harry, "Hey, Harry, this is Anduin in front of you. You must remember in the future, don't be as conceited as this guy." Cyrus, with a bad taste, hugged Harry and said words that asked for a beating, regardless of whether little Harry could understand it or not. Anduin rolled his eyes, looked at the ignorant Harry, took Harry's hand, and said teasingly, "Hey, Little Harry, your godfather looks annoying, but he is actually more annoying. Don't learn to be so sloppy from him in the future. Cyrus was immediately unhappy when he heard it, and took Harry away from Anduin, saying, "What are you doing? Don't teach my little Harry bad things." When holding Harry, Cyrus was not at all like the carefree look he had outside. Instead, his face was full of love. If you didn't know, you would think this was his own child. Anduin played with Cyrus and little Harry for a while, and then James called Cyrus and asked him for something. Cyrus handed little Harry to Anduin and went to find James. Anduin held little Harry and looked at the little guy who was still sucking his fingers. He didn't look like a savior at all. Soon Cyrus came back and said, "Anduin, James suggested that we take a group photo together. Come and join us." Anduin agreed and came to the fireplace with Harry in his arms. James and Lupin had already moved the furniture in the living room. Alice Longbottom also called Lily and Augusta from the kitchen. Several people lined up in a row. James and his wife and the Longbottoms stood in the middle. Cyrus, Lupin, and Peter stood on James' side and Augusta stood on the other side. In order to take symmetrical photos, Anduin stood next to Augusta. Soon James adjusted the camera and motioned everyone to smile at the camera. Soon the cameras in front of everyone flashed. But after taking the photo, Anduin felt something was wrong. He looked down at his arms and found that Harry was still in his arms. Everyone was so busy taking pictures that they forgot to let Lily and James carry Harry over. Little Neville was also not held in the arms of the Longbottoms, but was held by his grandmother Augusta. They took the group photo in a daze. I say, did you forget something when you took the photo just now? Did you two not even care about your own children? Anduin looked at the young couple in silence. At this time, everyone noticed something was wrong, and then burst into laughter. Lily took Harry from Anduin and said to Anduin, "It seems that Harry likes you very much. He didn't cry when you held him for so long, and I didn't notice it for so long. Then do you want to take another photo? If both children are not held by you two, is it still a family photo?" Anduin said, "It doesn't matter. As long as you have each other in your heart, you are still a family even if you are not together." Lily said something philosophical in a very open-minded way, and James and the Longbottom couple did not plan to take another photo, but rushed to the restaurant together to enjoy the Christmas dinner. It seemed that fate was using the photo to foretell something, but they didn't know that everyone's future would reflect reality like this photo today. At this time, Anduin didn't think much about it, and joined the crowd to enjoy the Christmas dinner. Everyone enjoyed Christmas delicacies amidst laughter and joy, and after tasting Anduin's craftsmanship, everyone gave their praise generously. After the dinner, everyone gathered in the living room after having a good meal and a good drink, and exchanged Christmas gifts together. Anduin also took out the gifts he had prepared. The gifts for Lily included children's books and music boxes, and for James he gave a beautifully packaged joy potion. At the same time, he also took out other packaged joy potions. Almost everyone had one. Seeing that Anduin had prepared gifts for everyone, everyone's impression of him was greatly improved. Augusta saw that Anduin was so polite, but she did not prepare a gift for Anduin in advance, and then took out a silver chain from her body and gave it to Anduin. This was originally a semi-finished jewelry she asked a craftsman to make. She originally wanted to make another opening and closing pendant, put a photo of her grandson on it, and then use the chain to string it into a necklace for herself, but now she didn't have anything to show off, so she represented the Longbottom family to give this as a gift to Anduin. Anyway, it wouldn't take much effort to make another one later. The Potters gave Anduin a set of books from the series Mysteries of Magical Defencer, and there were also blessings written by Lily and James on the books. Lily knew that Anduin was very hard-working, and she also learned from Professor Flitwick that he had great potential in spells, so she copied this set of magic books from the Potter family library. This set of books is rarely circulated on the market, and it is a rare and precious academic book. Anduin was also very happy to see this, and kept expressing his gratitude to Lily and James. And Cyrus also mysteriously took out the gift he prepared. Anduin originally thought that a carefree person like Cyrus would probably just give a bag of gold galleons, but when he took out the gift, Anduin was still surprised. Cyrus took out a small bag made of linen. Anduin took it and found that it was an alchemical prop with the untraceable extension spell applied. There were about 3 or 4 cubic spaces in it, which was a very good space prop. How about this thing? It's good, isn't it? This magic bag is valid for about 4 or 5 years, which is basically enough for you to use until graduation. When I saw you holding so many things that day, I thought about what to give you. Cyrus said to Anduin proudly. Anduin was also very excited to receive this surprise. He had thought about whether to buy a space prop before. After all, he often had to prepare a lot of luggage when traveling, but he knew that a magic traceless stretching prop with a shelf life of only 1 or 2 years would cost 20 or 30 gold galleons. He struggled for a while and still didn't decide whether to buy it. He didn't expect Cyrus to be so considerate. For a while, Anduin rarely mocked Cyrus, but instead said a lot of good things to him, and Cyrus also laughed proudly. Just like that, everyone was immersed in laughter. I guess the Death Eaters won't show up today, and I don't know what's going on at the Weasley family. Cyrus whispered beside Anduin. It seems that although he had a lot of fun before, he was always on guard. Chapter 55 Raid. Suddenly, a piercing alarm sounded, pulling everyone out of the happy gathering. Damn, you were a jinx, you come as soon as you say it. As soon as Anduin heard the alarm, he knew something was wrong. Everyone in the house reacted quickly, probably because they were well prepared. They quickly drew their wands. James said loudly. According to the plan, Lily, Alice, Augusta, you guys stay in the house to be on guard and protect the children. The rest of you go out to defend against the enemy. Frank warns Dumbledore and the Aurors. James had just said half of his words when a rumble sounded outside the house. It seemed that the house's defensive magic was activated, and the Death Eaters outside the house launched an attack on the hut. Frank Longbottom waved his wand, and a silver-white mink sprang out from the tip of the wand. Then Frank muttered a few words besides the mink, and then the summoned mink quickly sprang out and passed through the wall and left. Is that a Patronus? Can it still be used like this? Anduin, who was standing aside, actually had time to think about these things at this time. The rest of the people also acted quickly. All the gentlemen took out their wands and rushed out. Anduin could only see a bunch of red, yellow, blue and green magic flashes reflected from the window. Lily also reacted quickly. She handed Harry in her arms to Anduin and said to everyone, "Follow me." Anduin knew that this was not the time to show off. He followed Lily closely. Then several people followed Lily to the basement. Lily pushed open a door and let several people in. The room looked like a storage room, with many shelves full of items piled around. After Lily led everyone into the house, she immediately walked to a wall and knocked on a few bricks with her wand. Then Anduin felt a wave of magic spreading from the bricks that Lily knocked along the wall. This is a safe house. After turning on that protective magic, it is difficult to open it from the outside. Support should arrive soon. Don't worry. After performing a series of operations, Lily still said with a relaxed look. Anduin was holding little Harry, and he felt a little relieved after hearing what Lily said. Augusta, who was holding Neville, was very calm. He looked at Anduin and said, "Don't worry, we are well prepared. This time, we will make sure that these insidious guys will never come back." It turned out that they were so well prepared. Anduin was afraid of any accidents before, but seeing Lily's skilled appearance, it was obvious that she was well prepared, which made him feel relieved. Then everyone was quietly on guard in this small room. At the same time, they could vaguely hear the sounds coming from above, including the sound of spells exchanging fire and the sound of booming explosions. They didn't know what the battle situation was. What expression would the Death Eaters have when they attacked and found themselves surrounded? Augusta said with a smile. After a while, Augusta even had the mood to joke with a few people. It seemed that his mentality was still very relaxed. At this time, something strange happened. Suddenly, there was a rustling sound outside the basement. Everyone in the room looked at each other and became nervous. They picked up their wands and were on guard. They didn't know whether the people outside were enemies or friends. Could it be that the battle above was over? Soon, everyone understood. Because the people outside launched an attack on this room, everyone in the room could clearly hear the bang-bang sound of powerful spells released outside. There were also pieces of magic ripples on the walls and doors of the room, which was a sign of the protective magic being attacked. What's going on? Didn't Frank and Potter and the others stop the Death Eaters? Why haven't the reinforcements arrived yet? Did they know who attacked personally? Alice Longbottom asked nervously when she saw that the Death Eaters had actually attacked here. Augusta was very calm. He held Neville in one hand and held his wand in the other. He said calmly, "Don't be nervous. No one knows what's happening outside. We should not panic." Lily's eyes also showed a little solemnity, but she still nodded calmly and said, "Although we don't know how the Death Eaters outside broke through their defenses, we can only rely on ourselves now. What we have to do is to stay calm and fight back." Anduin nodded when he saw this, but he looked at the protective magic that was gradually deformed due to the continuous attacks with some worry. He didn't know how long the protective magic here could last, so he waved his wand, piled the tables and boxes around him in front of everyone, and said, "First, find a way to build a shelter. If the door is lost, take the lead in launching an attack." At first, several people didn't know what Anduin was going to do, but after hearing Anduin's explanation, they thought it made sense, so they waved their wands to help. After a while, everyone used some boxes, tables, chairs and other sundries in front of them to build a semicircular shelter half a person's height facing the door. Then Anduin said, "If the protective magic is broken later, I'm not very skilled in using the armor spell. Lily, your protective spell is the strongest. Then, Lily, you'll be responsible for defense. Alice and Augusta, you'll be responsible for attacking, and I will be responsible for covering and assisting the attack." After hearing this, everyone thought about it and nodded in agreement. Under Anduin's continuous arrangement, everyone's position was also adjusted. Lily and Alice were in the middle, and Anduin and Augusta stood on both sides of the back holding Harry and Neville respectively. If there was a spell that they could not resist in time, they would squat down and hide behind that cover to avoid it. After someone gave the command, the emotions of several people in the room gradually stabilized, and they no longer felt nervous. This is the case when people have no backbone. They are most likely to have self-shaking thoughts and emotions. Then, let alone maintaining normal combat effectiveness, spellcasting errors may occur. After the preparations were completed, Anduin carefully observed the protective magic at the door and said, "It seems that they are preparing to concentrate their firepower to break through a point. Judging from the attack status of the protective magic, it is very likely that they will break through from the position of the gate. If the gate is knocked away later, I will first control the door panel to interfere with the enemy's vision, and you will wait for an opportunity to attack. If the gate is broken or falls, I will try to interfere with the enemy's balance, and you will attack first. Remember, be quick and decisive." The three people next to him nodded subconsciously. Although Anduin was the youngest among them, they still subconsciously followed Anduin's command. Soon, the defensive magic at the gate revealed an irregular gap under the continuous attack, and then under the spell of the enemy behind that door, the door of the entrance of the room flew back fiercely with a bang. Chapter 56. Defensive Counterattack. Do it. Anduin very skillfully controlled the door panel flying in the air, making it fly back horizontally. The Death Eaters outside the house were about to laugh triumphantly when they saw the door panel that had just been knocked flying back and hit them. They could only shoot spells at the door panel in a panic. Just as the two Death Eaters at the door smashed the door panel, the spells fired by Lily, Alice and Augusta in the room also flew in front of them. One of the Death Eaters was hit by two spells on the spot and flew back heavily. The other Death Eater reacted quickly and dodged outside the door, barely avoiding the spells shot in front of him. At this time, another Death Eater took the position of the man who was not flying and launched an attack on the room, but the spell he fired was easily defended by Lily's armor charm. Alice and Augusta beside him also launched counterattacks one after another. At one time, the two Death Eaters at the door were throwing spells everywhere. The two Death Eaters at the door had no time to counterattack under the fierce attack. They were beaten back slowly and had to defend passively. The few weevil spells they occasionally fired were easily blocked by Lily. At this time, another person appeared behind the two Death Eaters and instantly cast a powerful armor spell to block the several spells. Then the three of them rushed into the room together, two in front and one behind. What was Anduin doing at this time? In addition to supporting a few cannonballs condensed by the barrier spell, he had been preparing another magic. The two people who rushed in front of them had just stepped into the room when the ground under their feet suddenly cracked, and their bodies sank into the ground by 1/3. This was the extraction spell that Anduin had been preparing before. When the third Death Eater appeared, Anduin knew that the situation was not good, so he began to cast the extraction spell on the ground in advance. Although the floor at the door looked normal, the soil under the ground had long been emptied by Anduin using the extraction spell. Seeing this, the people behind the bunkers did not hesitate and directly focused several spells on the two people who lost their balance. The Death Eater who followed behind cast two armor spells in a row, but both were penetrated. The two Death Eaters who fell to the ground were immediately beaten unconscious. The Death Eater behind him saw that things were not good, so he took out a bottle of potion from his arms, cast defensive magic with one hand, and poured the potion into his mouth with the other hand. After drinking the potion, the Death Eater's eyes turned red. After soaring to the sky, he continued to attack, and the spells he cast were strong and fast, and he pushed the offensive back in an instant. The Death Eater was throwing spells with all his might, roaring crazily, and even throwing out 2 of Avada Kedavra spells, while Lily cleverly lifted up several piled furniture. Although the power of the killing curse smashed the furniture, it also blocked the killing curse. However, the Death Eater became more and more crazy, and the spells he cast were fast and urgent, causing Alice and Augusta to passively defend themselves in addition to Lily. But just when the Death Eater was about to take advantage of the situation and move forward, he seemed to be unable to breathe. He covered his throat with one hand and barely fired spells with the other hand. After a few seconds, the Death Eater could not even recite the spell. "Hurry, now." Anduin on the side struggled to maintain the spell, and took the time to remind everyone. Only then did they realize that this was the effect of Anduin's spell, and they quickly worked together to blast out several spells and knock the Death Eater to the ground. At this time, all the Death Eaters inside and outside the room were finally knocked down, and no new Death Eaters came in to reinforce. At this time, Anduin finally breathed a sigh of relief and put down the wand that had been casting spells. He had just used the extraction spell on the Death Eater, but this time he did not cast the spell on the ground, but directly cast the spell on the air around the Death Eater. Anduin had once experimented with the rabbit caught by Hagrid. He could not cast a spell on a resisting living being, unless it was a non-resisting living being or a dead object. At the time, Anduin thought about how to apply this spell in battle. One method is to act on the enemy's ground, just like before, using the extraction spell to extract the soil underground, creating a trap or making the opponent lose balance. Another method that Anduin envisioned is to drain the air in front of the enemy, causing difficulty in breathing for the opponent, until suffocation and shock. Of course, Anduin had thought about whether he could just extract the oxygen in the air, but this requires very strong control and perception, which is impossible for him now. This was the first time that Anduin used the extraction spell in this way, and the effect was very good. Spells with ballistic trajectories could be resisted, but the extraction spell, which had no ballistic trajectory, was simply impossible to defend against. The Death Eater lost his combat effectiveness due to suffocation before he could figure out what was going on. Of course, the disadvantages were also obvious. First, it required a strong sense of perception, that is, magical sensitivity, so that he could sense and cast the spell on the air in front of the enemy. Secondly, it required continuous casting, because air was not solid, and the air just extracted would soon be replenished by the air next to it. This also caused Anduin to concentrate and continue casting spells until the Death Eater was suffocated and could not speak, and then he had time to remind the others. Lily and the others saw that no other Death Eaters tried to attack again, and they finally breathed a sigh of relief. The high-intensity attack and defense just now made everyone very tired. But before they could catch their breath, another figure flashed outside the door. At this time, everyone almost reflexively cast spells and shot at the door. The people who came to the door didn't expect that they would be attacked by several spells just when they were about to come in to check the situation. Fortunately, driven by their fighting instincts for many years, they quickly set up a protective spell to block the incoming spells, and shouted at the same time, "Don't attack, it's me, you see clearly." At this time, everyone had time to identify the person in detail. With the help of the dim light, they saw that it was Madame Moody. "Thank God, you finally got here." Seeing that it was Moody, Augusta finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Oh my God, what happened? There are so many Death Eaters lying here. Did you knock them down?" Moody was surprised to see a Death Eater lying outside the safe house and 3 people lying inside the house. 2 of them were still stuck in the ground. "Humph, otherwise, could it be that they knocked themselves out? Where have you been? How did Death Eaters find this place?" Augusta saw that they were finally safe and couldn't help but question in a stern tone. At this time, Moody also talked about the battle outside the house. It turned out that Moody brought a number of Aurors and members of the Order of the Phoenix, who had been lying in ambush nearby. Not long after the battle started, they arrived at the scene to provide support. Chapter 57 of Avada Kedavra. They fought fiercely with many Death Eaters outside the Potter's house, but the Death Eaters were caught off guard by the ambush set up by Moody and others, and were beaten back step by step. But at this time, he who must not be named appeared. Moody paused here. "The mysterious man? The Dark Lord also appeared?" Augusta and Lily exclaimed. Moody nodded and continued, "Yes, when the Death Eaters were besieged, the Dark Lord came to support them. His magic was very strong, a kind of power that could be felt from a distance even if the other party did not cast a spell. Not long after he appeared, he used the fire curse to summon a giant flaming snake and tried to attack us. Just when we were busy parrying, Dumbledore also showed up. We had made arrangements beforehand that he would always be on guard against the Dark Lord, so when the mysterious man showed up, Dumbledore provided timely support. He used a powerful spell that looked like End of All Curses, which directly broke up the fire curse and fought with the mysterious man. But the situation was very chaotic at the time. Everyone was scattered because they were avoiding the Dark Lord's spell, including the Death Eaters. We didn't dare to gather around Dumbledore for fear of affecting his battle, so we could only fight on our own. Then Moody looked at the Death Eaters lying on the ground, and then said, I guess it was at the time that these guys used the disillusionment charm or the invisibility cloak to sneak in. The situation was very chaotic at the time, and each of them had their own battles to deal with, so they may have neglected this point. So, what's the situation now? How about Frank and the others? Are they okay? Alice Longbottom heard this and asked about her husband's situation nervously. Lily and Augusta also looked at Moody nervously. Don't worry, your husbands are fine. We fought for a long time, but the Death Eaters retreated with the Dark Lord when they saw the situation was not good. Except for Cyrus and Peter, who were slightly injured, no one else was injured. Now the Aurors are still recovering the scene under the command of Barty Crouch, and they have to process the memories of the Muggles around. James and Frank are upstairs to take care of Cyrus and Peter. They asked me to come down to inform you that the crisis is over. Moody lowered his head and glanced at the Death Eaters lying around in the bunkers that were surrounded like a fortress, and said speechlessly, as a result, I just came down to see such a scene just now, and I was almost killed by you. Then don't expect us to apologize to you, you don't know what happened to us just now. Augusta said bluntly. Moody couldn't help but shrugged helplessly. Seeing the serious Moody being defeated by Augusta, everyone couldn't help but smile. But at this time, something strange happened. Behind everyone, the last Death Eater who fell suddenly struggled, perhaps because of the residual effect of the potion, and roared loudly. Long live the Dark Lord. Long live Voldemort. Avada Kedavra. He raised his wand and attacked everyone. At this time, everyone had already walked out. Only Anduin and Moody were left at the end. Anduin reacted quickly. At the moment when the Death Eater raised his wand, Anduin quickly raised his wand. As the wand was waved, a ball of air formed an airflow, which blew towards the opponent with great force, directly blowing the Death Eater staggering. The wands aimed at Anduin and Harry were also blown up high. The killing curse shot from his right hand was pushed up by his arm and shot diagonally towards the ceiling. At this time, Moody beside him also reacted, raised his wand to the Death Eater, and shouted, Avada Kedavra. A green magic beam instantly hit the Death Eater, and the Death Eater collapsed and fell on his back. The few people who had already walked out of the door had never expected that someone could stand up and attack after being hit by several stun spells. Everything that happened suddenly shocked everyone, and they hurried back to check. Little guy, you reacted quickly. After Moody killed the guy with the killing curse, he looked down at Anduin, and said to Anduin with a more hideous smile on his hideous face. Good guy, don't laugh, your dignity is more scary than the Death Eater when you laugh. Anduin saw Moody looking at him with a smile, and couldn't help complaining in his heart. But Anduin said calmly, same here, you reacted quickly too. Oh my god, Anduin, are you okay? This damn guy, I don't know what kind of potion he drank, he can even crawl up like this. Augusta walked to Anduin and said with lingering fear. Looking at the crazy look of this guy, it must be dragon madness blood. They are really crazy. They dare to use such a banned drug. Moody stepped forward to check the dead Death Eaters and said coldly. Anduin was also in a state of lingering fear. If he hadn't reacted quickly just now, he might have died here. He didn't disarm these people in time after the battle, causing their wands to be thrown on the ground. It was a mistake. At this time, as if he was also frightened, Harry in Anduin's arms cried loudly, and Neville in Augusta's arms also cried loudly. The two little guys were very quiet in the previous battle. Anduin even forgot about their existence for a while. Now it seemed like a switch was turned on and they finally cried loudly. Anduin was not good at coaxing children, so he quickly handed Harry back to Lily. Thank you for your hard work, Anduin. You have been helping me take care of Harry. Lily took little Harry, looked at him with loving eyes, and bowed her head to thank Anduin. In the previous battle, Lily was responsible for defending all frontal attacks. It was Anduin who had been taking care of Harry. Just now, the crazy guy almost hit Harry with the killing curse, and it was Anduin who reacted in time to save him. Lily didn't know how to thank Anduin at this time. You're welcome, Lily, we're friends, this is what we should do. Anduin stretched out his left hand, which was a little numb because of holding Harry, and said politely. Okay, you guys hurry up, I'll take care of it here, and go find your husbands quickly. Moody said to several people while collecting the wands of the unconscious Death Eaters. Lily and the others, along with Anduin, nodded and began to walk out. Mad-Eye Moody, who stayed behind, first used a levitation spell to pull up the two Death Eaters trapped on the ground, then dragged the fainted Death Eater outside the door into the house, and laid the four of them side by side. Seeing that one of the Death Eaters was about to wake up, he also cast a stunning spell on him. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 58. Minister Millicent Barnold, come, let me see who this mad dog is. Moody muttered to himself as he took off the mask of the Death Eater he had killed. It turned out to be Evan Rosier. I should have thought of this guy earlier. I didn't expect that he had been corrupted so deeply by the Dark Lord. It seems that he and Wilkes, who was killed above, were classmates. He dared to resist arrest, and he deserves to die. Moody was scolding and beating up several people. Suddenly he thought of something and said to himself, by the way, that little wizard Anduin just now, was that a silent spell? And the number of Death Eaters they knocked down here is more than the number of Death Eaters left on the front battlefield. They are really an amazing group of guys. The people who walked to the ground had just returned to the main hall. The front door of the house and the walls inside the house were all bumpy, and it seemed that they had experienced a lot of fierce battles. Many Aurors and colleagues from the Order of the Phoenix were helping to repair them. On the other side of the main hall, a group of people were gathered together, and surrounded in the middle were Cyrus and Peter Pettigrew. James, Frank, Lily and Alice each held their children and went to meet their lovers. Lily, thank God, we won. You don't know what we just went through. James and the others seemed to be unaware that Death Eaters had sneaked into the underground safe house. They hugged Lily with lingering fear. The gathered people also turned around and greeted the people who came up. Anduin saw Edgar Bones, Emmeline Vance, Gideon Prewett, and a man who looked similar to him beside Gideon. He must be his brother Fabian. There was also a lady who was with him. She looked a bit similar to Charles. This must be the Aunt Marlene McKinnon that Charles had mentioned to him. At this time, Cyrus and Peter Pettigrew were surrounded in the middle. One of them had gauze wrapped around his upper body and the other had his right arm bandaged. It seemed that they were injured in the battle just now. At this time, Peter Pettigrew was still talking about how he was so brave just now, and how he rolled hard to avoid a spell, resulting in a cut on his right hand. Cyrus, who was standing next to him, was obviously more seriously injured, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he hid the energy to make a face at Anduin after seeing him. After listening to Peter's boasting, Anduin felt that he was really unlucky. It turned out that he was injured by himself, and it was the right hand that used the wand. Doesn't that mean that he was just a bystander after the injury and did nothing? Lily, who was standing by, saw the two injured people, handed Harry to her husband James, then walked up to them and gave them a hug, and said, thank you, Peter, Cyrus, you are all heroes today. Cyrus just wanted to grin, but probably pulled his wound, so he could only grin and say, it's nothing, Lily, we just chased away some bastards. It's a pity that only 3 people were left, and the others were rescued, Augusta Longbottom, who was standing by, laughed and said, that's not necessarily true, there are 4 more lying in the basement downstairs. Ah? What? There are still Death Eaters downstairs? What's going on? Only then did everyone realize that someone had sneaked into the basement and might have had a fight with Lily and her gang. James' reaction was the strongest. He quickly pulled Lily and said, what's going on? Did some Death Eaters sneak into the safe house? You're not hurt, are you? Augusta, who was standing nearby, interrupted at this time. Can't you tell with your eyes whether you're injured or not? My goodness, you have no idea how dangerous the scene was when we fought those Death Eaters in the basement. Lily, who was being pulled by James, was afraid that Augusta would exaggerate and tell others about the crazy Death Eater who stood up and attacked, which would scare everyone. She quickly interrupted. Don't worry, I cast a protective magic in the safe house downstairs. We were prepared in advance. It was all thanks to Anduin's idea. As soon as they broke the protective magic, we dealt with them. Lily was afraid that everyone would worry, so she downplayed it, but the situation was actually very dangerous, not to mention that there were 2 children under the age of 1. However, Augusta at the side also understood what Lily meant, so he did not continue to say anything. Instead, he glared at his son Frank. Since they came up, Frank has been pulling Alice, touching this and looking there, afraid that a piece of skin would fall off. Instead, he has been ignoring his old mother. Hey, Lily, do you know who the Death Eater who died down there is? It's your old classmate. Mad Eye Moody arrived before he arrived. He limped in front of everyone, and there were 4 Death Eaters floating behind him. 3 of them were trapped in the ball, and the other one, or the other corpse, was floating alone. What? When everyone heard that there was a death down there, they couldn't help but ask again. How come another Death Eater died? What happened to you in the safe house? Did you kill him, Lily? James couldn't help but ask Lily nervously. Moody, who had just come up, laughed and said, I killed that guy. It was really thrilling just now. If Anduin hadn't reacted quickly, the guy who drank the blood madness potion might have cast his killing curse on your baby son. James couldn't help but take a breath after hearing this, and looked at Lily with a questioning look. At this time, 3 people walked in from outside the house. One was Dumbledore, one was a middle-aged man with a mustache, and the other was a middle-aged woman with a dignified face. When Moody saw the 3 people coming in, he nodded and greeted them, Dumbledore, Minister Barnold, Director Crouch. When everyone saw the Minister of Magic and the Director of the Department of Law Enforcement coming in with Dumbledore, they also greeted the 3 people. When Minister Millicent Barnold saw everyone, she said in a slow and gentle tone, Thank you for your hard work today. Tonight is a victory for us against the Death Eaters. We killed 2 people on the spot and formally arrested 1 Death Eater. Moody on the side heard it and laughed. Minister, there is more tonight's harvest than that. Another person was killed and 3 Death Eaters were arrested. Only then did Millicent Barnold see that there were 4 people lying at Moody's feet. She couldn't help but said in surprise, Are there any fish that slipped through the net? Barty Crouch next to the minister was also surprised to look at the 4 people lying next to Moody. After seeing the face of one person clearly, he said in surprise, Is this Evan Rosier? Please recommend, vote for monthly tickets, and collect Chapter 59. The wise minister. Seeing this, Dumbledore looked at everyone with a little surprise. Seeing that everyone's eyes were looking at Lily and Augusta, he smiled and said, It seems that there are still people who have experienced many wonderful adventures in places we don't know about. Can Mrs. Longbottom tell us about your adventures? When Augusta heard Dumbledore ask her, she couldn't help but look at Lily. Seeing that Lily also looked back at her with helpless eyes, she had to tell everyone about the fierce battle in the basement safe house. When we found that someone was attacking the protective magic circle outside the safe house, Anduin suggested that we build an internal defense line. Then under Anduin's control, the guy who drank the blood madness potion was knocked down by us. Augusta told everyone the battle that had happened before in detail. After listening to Augusta's story, Millicent Barnold was secretly surprised. There were actually Death Eaters sneaking in and attacking women and children who were hiding. It was simply abominable. Millicent gritted her teeth in hatred, and then asked in confusion, How could a Death Eater die? From what you said, it seems that no one was killed. That was me, Minister. Moody on the side said, and then he repeated what happened after he entered the safe house. Evan Rosier was crazy, shouting long like the Dark Lord, and cast a killing curse on Anduin and little Harry. If Anduin hadn't reacted quickly and interfered with the guy, the killing curse would have hit them. I saw the situation was urgent, so I cast a killing curse on him. Moody said while laughing viciously, and those who didn't know him would think he was a perverted murderer. Well, you can't show mercy at a critical moment. I declare your use of the unforgivable curse this time as a legitimate law enforcement act. Minister Millicent Barnold was a resolute minister, and directly declared that Moody's use of the unforgivable curse was legal. Then he looked at Anduin and said, Mr. Anduin Wilson, I declare your off-campus spellcasting this time to be legal, and your behavior at the critical moment was brave and alert. Not only did you assist in the arrest of 4 Death Eaters in the safe house, but you also protected a child at a critical moment. I will apply for commendations and rewards for you, especially since you are still a minor wizard. Please keep working hard. When Anduin heard this, he immediately became energetic. No wonder everyone he knew said that this new minister was very smart and capable. Now he finally had a deep understanding of it. Rewards didn't matter, and he didn't plan to become too famous now, otherwise it would be bad to attract attention. But when he heard that there was actually a reward, he was very happy. This is what I should do. I can't bear to see my friends get hurt. Anduin was very happy, but he still spoke in a high-sounding manner. Minister Millicent Barnold nodded in approval when she heard Anduin's words, and then encouraged and praised Lily and others one by one, and then ordered Moody to drag the prisoners and the bodies out. Dumbledore, who was watching all this, also nodded with a smile, and when he heard about the battle in the basement, he couldn't help but look at Anduin a few more times. He keenly realized that Anduin's command and the casting of spells at the critical moment were crucial for them to be safe and sound this time and to achieve such a good result. Dumbledore thought to himself, it seems that he is another young man with a great future. I can take some time to get to know him when I go back. However, would these Death Eaters sneak in and attack women and children at the critical moment of the battle? And judging from Evan Rosier's series of actions, he may have received orders from Tom. It seems that the son of prophecy between Harry and Neville is also of great concern to our Dark Lord. Dumbledore pondered the connection between the two sons of prophecy and Voldemort, and considered how to take action against the Death Eaters next. Voldemort's target was obviously one of Harry and Neville, but who exactly was it? It seemed that he had to find a way to contact Snape again. On the other side, after listening to Augusta's story, James blamed himself and apologized to Lily. I'm sorry, Lily, I wasn't with you when you and your son were in such a dangerous moment. I didn't fulfill my responsibilities as a husband. Lily comforted her. Don't say such things. No one could have imagined that something like this would happen. I didn't want to say these before because I was afraid you would worry. If you have time to apologize, you might as well spend some time thanking Anduin. He saved Harry's life. James nodded and looked for Anduin, but Anduin had already run to Cyrus. Seeing that they were talking, he did not interrupt them, thinking that he would compensate and thank Anduin later. Anduin came to Cyrus, looked at Cyrus's embarrassed appearance, and said with a smile, "It looks like you are seriously injured, can you still move?" Cyrus coughed a few times and said stubbornly, "Humph, it's nothing, even if I fight another battle, it's no problem, it's just a lung injury." It turned out that Cyrus rushed too hard in the previous battle, and was pierced through the chest by the Death Eaters with the blade curse, which made him feel painful to breathe and speak now. Dumbledore also came over this time and said, "Cyrus, let's go, we have to send you to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. Although your injury has been simply treated, you still have to go to the hospital for treatment for a while." Cyrus wanted to show off, but Anduin poked Cyrus's wound lightly, causing Cyrus to cough violently for a long time, which made him almost speechless and could only stare at Anduin angrily. After a while, Cyrus said, "Well, what about Anduin? I'm a little worried about letting this kid live alone in my house, although he should be able to take care of himself." James also came over and said, "It's okay, just go to the hospital with peace of mind. Anduin can stay with me for the time being. I'll take him to get his luggage tomorrow." Seeing this, Cyrus nodded helplessly, glared at Anduin and said, "Boy, don't show off like you did today, otherwise you'll fall sooner or later." Seeing that Cyrus was so injured and still had time to worry about others, Anduin said, "As for showing off, no one is as good as you. You have made yourself into this state." Then he turned to look at Headmaster Dumbledore and said, "Professor, can you help me with something?" Chapter 60 Secret Meeting. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows and said, "Please go ahead, Mr. Wilson. I don't think I have any reason to refuse today's hero." Hearing Dumbledore praising him like this, Anduin couldn't help but smile awkwardly and said, "It's like this. I just heard Minister Barnold say that he would commend me. I wonder if it can be not announced publicly. After all, I don't like to be in the limelight. It's not good if a big tree attracts the wind." Hearing Anduin say this, Dumbledore also understood what he meant. At the same time, he recalled that Anduin was a member of Slytherin House, so he understood. Then Dumbledore said to Anduin, "I understand what you mean. I will ask Minister Barnold not to announce your commendation in public and in the media. Perhaps I can also ask Minister Barnold to replace your commendation with more physical rewards. How about this suggestion?" When Anduin heard what Dumbledore said, he laughed happily and said, "Thank you, Principal Dumbledore." Then Dumbledore left with Cyrus and Peter Pettigrew. Before leaving, Cyrus asked James to take good care of his beloved motorcycle. Anduin saw that this guy was so injured, but he was still thinking about his broken motorcycle, so he could only roll his eyes speechlessly. After a while, the Aurors also handled the restoration and memory deletion work in Godric's Hollow. The damaged parts of Lily's house were also repaired by everyone using the restoration spell. The Aurors and colleagues of the Order of the Phoenix also said goodbye. The Longbottom couple and old Mrs. Longbottom, who had experienced a battle in the basement together, also said goodbye to Lily and Anduin one by one. Augusta also invited Anduin to visit her when he had time, and Anduin gladly agreed. Soon, only the Potter couple, little Harry and Anduin, were left in the Potter family. Anduin, you worked hard today. Thank you for everything you have done today. I will take you to the guest room. Have a good rest here tonight, James said to Anduin with a smile. After everything that happened today, he also recognized this young wizard friend. James was hesitant about Cyrus inviting Anduin to the Christmas dinner. After all, they were not related and he was a Slytherin. But Lily seemed to have a good impression of this young man who was also born in Muggles, so James didn't say anything. However, after tonight, he also admired and appreciated Anduin's courage and wit in the crisis. Anduin looked at the gradually empty house and nodded to James, saying, "Okay, then I'll bother you. Don't say that. You're our friend, and after tonight you will become our comrade in arms and benefactor. You can live here without worry. We will always open the door for you." James laughed and said to Anduin. Lily, who was holding little Harry, also smiled and nodded to Anduin. In this way, Anduin spent the rest of the Christmas holiday at the Potter's house. On the other hand, after Dumbledore sent Cyrus to St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries, he did not return to Hogwarts directly, but came alone to a hill deep in the Forbidden Forest next to Hogwarts, as if waiting for someone. Dumbledore did not wait for long, and soon a figure appeared in front of Dumbledore through apparition. It was a Death Eater. The man gently took off his mask, revealing a gloomy face. It seems that Tom believed the prophecy. Dumbledore looked coldly at the man who appeared in front of him, and continued. Their attack on the members of the Order of the Phoenix tonight was just an illusion. Several Death Eaters who sneaked in almost killed Lily and her child. Is this what you want to see, Snape? Dumbledore's words made Snape, who had always had a cold expression on his face, gradually distorted, and he struggled and roared. The Dark Lord did not tell anyone about those people who sneaked in, including me. If I knew this would happen, I would stop it from happening. Stop? What are you going to stop? Do you still have the courage to stand in front of the Dark Lord? The moment you lead the prophecy to the Dark Lord, things were like a derailed steam train. No one can save it. His target is Lily and her child, you know. Dumbledore stared at Snape seriously. His tone was stiff and powerful, without a trace of mercy. Hearing this, Snape hunched over, like a dejected gambler who had lost all his fortune, and said stubbornly, "The Longbottom child could also be the child of the prophecy. No, it must be the Longbottom child. I will convince the Dark Lord to believe it. As long as he can convince him to cause trouble for the Longbottom family, Severus." Dumbledore had just looked at Snape coldly, but when he heard Snape say such cold-blooded words, he really couldn't help it, and showed an angry expression. For a moment, a strong magical fluctuation burst out from Dumbledore's body, and Snape was so frightened that he shut his mouth. Dumbledore stared at Snape fiercely at this time, calmed down a little, and said coldly, "Don't be naive. Do you know what your good classmate Evan Rosier did today? He not only sneaked into the Potter family, but also drank the Blood Madness potion, risking the price of becoming a madman forever, and wanted to kill Lily and her child before he died. If it weren't for Anduin, the boy who escaped from your hands before, who reacted quickly, you might have to say goodbye to Lily today. His behavior today also made me understand that Tom's goal has always been very clear. In fact, Anduin saved himself at the scene, or saved himself and little Harry, but Dumbledore concealed this part of the fact without any psychological burden. No. Snape couldn't hold on after hearing what Dumbledore said. He knelt down with his hands covering his face, and tears couldn't stop flowing from his eyes. He had always been loyal to Voldemort without any hesitation, but when Voldemort pointed the butcher knife at his beloved woman, his heart could not be as firm as usual. I know, I've always known it. I can feel it following him, but I've never been able to face this fact. Snape said painfully as if venting. The prophecy is not about a woman, but a boy born at the end of July, but I think Tom doesn't mind getting rid of his mother as well. Dumbledore's word further stimulated Snape. I know that the Dark Lord has long identified it as her child. He has been trying to find their whereabouts and try to kill them. And I just found out that today's target was not the Order of the Phoenix from the beginning, but them. The Dark Lord is sure that they will appear there today. Snape was in pain and despair. He had tried to convince himself with lies before. He always knew the truth in his heart, but he was unwilling to face it. Chapter 61 Guidance. The Death Eaters have a source of information in the Order of the Phoenix. Who is it? Dumbledore finally confirmed some things after listening to Snape's words, and continued to ask Snape. I don't know, it could be anyone. We can't let them be exposed to the public like this. The Dark Lord will always find an opportunity. Maybe next time, or the next time, he will succeed. I know he won't give up. Snape's voice trembled, but he still told Dumbledore everything he knew. Then Snape seemed to have made up his mind, and the balance in his heart fell to the other side. He said to Dumbledore in a pleading tone, "Hide her, hide them, I beg you." "Then what are you going to exchange, Snape?" Dumbledore looked at Snape with calm eyes and said lightly. After Snape made up his mind at this moment, his expression changed from previous struggle to the current slightly confused expression, and then he said softly, "Anything goes." Dumbledore saw that Snape had finally made up his mind, and a stone fell from his heart. He nodded and said softly, "Remember what you said today, I will find a way to protect Lily's family. If there is any unusual movement on Tom's side, remember to notify me, you know how to find me." Snape now seemed to be exhausted, nodded numbly, and then said, "The Anduin you just mentioned, is he the guy who saved that bastard Cyrus that day?" Dumbledore nodded and said, "Yes, and he was also sorted into Slytherin, but his position is much more firm than yours." "A Slytherin? Well, maybe my first choice was wrong. Help me give it to him, as a thank you gift to him." After that, Snape took out a bottle of potion from his arms and handed it to Dumbledore. "It seems that you are not so hopeless. Maybe one day you can express your gratitude to him face to face." Dumbledore looked at Snape's change of attitude, and finally smiled, and took the crystal bottle handed by Snape. Anduin, who they were talking about, had fallen into a deep sleep at this moment. The next day, James took Anduin to retrieve his luggage that he had left at Cyrus's house. With the traceless stretch bag, Anduin could now carry all his belongings with him. James was very shocked by the changes in Cyrus's home. He knew that Cyrus's home was very messy. Now seeing the neat and clean house, he could hardly believe his eyes. "That means you helped Black clean all this, which is really amazing." James repeatedly refreshed his impression of Anduin. Anduin didn't think it was a big deal, and then he and James went to St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries to visit Cyrus. That guy was not an idle guy at all, and he didn't stay in the bed honestly. If it weren't for James and Anduin's visit, he wouldn't even want to stay in the ward honestly. After seeing that this guy still had the energy to jump around, James and Anduin were relieved. After saying goodbye to Cyrus, they returned to Potter's residence before lunch. "Anduin, during the time you've been here, just tell us if you need any help. After all, you've helped us so much." During lunch, Lily looked at Anduin who was teasing little Harry and said with a smile, and James beside her nodded in approval. Hearing Lily say this, he felt a little embarrassed. He smiled and said, "I'm very satisfied with your care. You don't have to be so polite to me." Lily felt a little sorry when she heard Anduin say this. After thinking about it, she said, "By the way, aren't you very interested in the amulet and protective magic I gave you? I can teach you as much as possible during this time. You can also check out the Potter family's library at will. I think you can find what you want there." When Anduin heard what Lily said, he was overjoyed and said with a smile on his face, "Really? That's great. Professor Flitwick has always told me that you are his most proud disciple. I just happen to have a lot of questions to ask you." Seeing Anduin so studious, Lily couldn't help but think of her student days. Born a Muggle, hard-working, and with a strong desire for knowledge, Anduin's characteristics are very similar to hers. Looking at Anduin's black pupils and long black hair, as well as his Slytherin background, it reminded him of another former close friend. Lily was immersed in memories for a moment. At this time, Harry's untimely cry interrupted Lily's deep thoughts. She glanced at little Harry, and her eyes once again showed deep love. After lunch, after coaxing Harry to sleep, Lily brought Anduin to the underground safe house where the fierce battle had taken place before. At this time, the place had been tidied up, and most of the sundries had been taken away. The empty room made it a suitable practice classroom. After standing still in the room, Lily said to Anduin, "I've seen you cast the levitation charm and the extraction charm before, and you both used them very well. I guess you've spent a lot of time practicing spells. If you want to practice spells, you can do it here, and I can be your sparring partner. You can ask me any questions, as long as I can answer them for you." After hearing what Lily said, Anduin didn't hesitate to say anything. After thinking about his study of spells during this period, he said, "When I was practicing spells recently, I found that some spells were difficult to master, such as the Iron Shield charm. Either the spell was unsuccessful, or the Iron Shield charm I cast was not strong enough and was not as good as the obstacle charm I learned before. What's going on? What? You have already started practicing the shield charm. That is not a spell that you can master at your age. Even many Aurors who have just joined the Ministry of Magic may not be able to use this spell skillfully. Lily looked at Anduin differently when she heard that Anduin asked such a difficult question at the beginning. You know, her magical attainments are not small, but she only gradually mastered the shield charm after the 5th grade. Other students may not be able to cast it successfully once until graduation. So it is the problem of the difficulty of this spell. But I don't think its spell is complicated. Anduin asked puzzledly. In fact, it is not just the shield charm. It is difficult for him to cast the untraceable extension charm, patronus charm, disillusionment charm and so on in one go, but he confirmed that there was no problem with the spell he recited. When Lily heard Anduin say this, she knew that he must have a certain understanding of the Iron Armor spell, so she said, well, use the Iron Armor spell once, and I'll see where the problem lies. Thanks to the Big Brother Fanxing Zone for the reward, and thanks to the book friend 202109120934274 for the reward. Chapter 62 Magic Output. Anduin nodded, then raised his wand and shouted, Armor Protection. As Anduin chanted the spell, the magic power in his body surged, and a shield-shaped shield was formed at the tip of Anduin's wand, but the shield looked weak and could not take shape for a long time. After a few breaths, it dissipated like foam. Lily was amazed to see that Anduin could barely cast the Iron Armor spell. It seemed that her junior brother had very precise control of magic power. You know, when she'd first started to use the Iron Armor spell, there was no reaction when she chanted the spell. Then Lily asked Anduin to cast the Iron Armor spell several times again. Anduin did it one by one, but the Iron Armor spell he cast either disappeared after a few flashes, or was as weak as the first time he cast it. However, Lily quickly found the crux of the problem and said to Anduin, I think I understand. There is no problem with your spell, and your magic control is just right. But it is still difficult to cast the spell successfully in your current condition. But this is actually normal. Anduin tilted his head in confusion. There is no problem with the spell, but he still can't cast the spell successfully. Is this normal? Does it have something to do with my condition? Lily didn't let Anduin think for too long before she explained, well, let me give you an example and you'll understand. You're born a muggle, so you should know about water pipes and valves. Normally when we cast spells and chant incantations, it's like opening a valve in our bodies, and our magic power is like water flowing through an invisible water pipe. This water pipe is not as hard as iron, but like a hose with life. And our ability to control magic can make this water pipe lead to the right place and not let the water flow astray. If the control is strong, we can even control the flow rate and density. If our control over magic is insufficient, we won't be able to control the water flow. The more powerful the magic, the faster the water flow and the more difficult it is to control. But this is not your problem. Your control over magic is amazing. Then Lily paused and said, but in addition to controlling the magic power, there is another important factor that determines whether a spell is successful, and that is whether your water pipe is thick enough. Even if a small water pipe is filled with water, the water output is still not large. This is the case in your case. The shield charm is a defensive spell that consumes a lot of energy and can resist most evil curses and black magic, including the unforgivable curse. If you want to cast an shield charm with sufficient strength, you must not only control the magic power, but also ensure that the magic power injected is sufficient and strong enough. When Anduin heard Lily's analogy, he immediately understood that the magic power output per unit time was not enough to support him to use such a powerful magic. Then he asked puzzledly, then how can I make my water pipe big enough, or how can I output enough magic? After hearing Anduin's question, Lily smiled and said, it seems that you still don't fully understand. The so-called water pipes are your body. You are young now and your body has not yet grown, so it is naturally difficult for you to cast powerful spells. As you grow older and your physique improves, it will be very easy to cast spells with your current control. In addition to making the water pipes in your body thicker, you can also make the water flow more urgent and faster, so that the magic power injected will be enough to support you in casting spells. But I don't recommend you to do this. Your inability to successfully cast a spell is a warning from your body. If you forcefully speed up the injection of magic power, it will be very bad for your body. If your physique is not good enough, The water pipes may rupture and cause damage to your body. I see. Anduin understood. So he couldn't cast spells because he was still young, right? And from what Lily meant, if he wanted to output enough magic power in a unit of time, one way was to wait until his body grew up, so that his body could circulate more magic power at once. Another way was to pressurize, just like a water pump pressurizes water, so that the magic power would flow out rapidly, but the consequence of that might be excessive pressure, and then the body would explode. At the same time, he recalled the God of War. The power of this spell was not weak, but it was not difficult for him to cast it. It seemed that the magic power required for this spell was not very exaggerated. This made him raise the danger level of the God of War again in his mind. It was powerful, but the casting standard was not high. It was even more dangerous than the forbidden spell. As for forcibly practicing the iron armor spell, he would not rashly try such a high-risk thing. He didn't want to die, and getting injured was something that was unacceptable. It seemed that he couldn't practice these magics that required a lot of magic power support in a short period of time. However, since the output of magic power was related to physical fitness, exercise and eating more food that enhanced physical fitness should be effective. Anduin finished his calculations. It seemed that it was necessary for him to persist in exercise and practice for a long time. He would have to eat more food to strengthen his physique. He had eaten a lot of meat from magical animals before, and he had tried dragon liver. It really strengthened his physique. If he continued like this, he would be able to cast these spells successfully in no time. Since he could not practice these spells that required strong magic power for the time being, he could only change the direction. Anduin was going to start with ancient runes, study some rune theories and learn to make alchemical props. At the same time, during the time of magic practice, Anduin was going to start learning brain occlusion and legilimency. It was said that Salazar Slytherin, the founder of Slytherin College, was a master of legilimency. Many well-known masters of legilimency also came from Slytherin. I don't know if this rule will work for Anduin. After thinking about it, Anduin explained to Lily that he wanted to study runes and wanted to learn from her how to make alchemical props. I'm relieved to see that you're not going to practice the Oma charm. That's a very risky attempt. But I'm not particularly good at ancient runes and alchemy. I can only teach you what I know. In fact, if you're interested in alchemy, you can learn from Professor Dumbledore. I remember that Mr. Edgar Bones also has a high level of attainment in alchemy. Lily told Anduin in a gentle tone. I don't think you need to be modest. I think that amulet is very practical. I'm satisfied to learn how to make a magic prop like that amulet. Anduin didn't think Lily's level was as bad as she said. In the research materials and textbooks that Anduin had read, he could clearly feel that she was at least very experienced in runes. Chapter 63 Rune Workbench. Well, then we have to move to another place. It seems that the venue I arranged cannot be used. Lily shrugged and said. The two quickly moved to the study. Lily didn't know how well Anduin knew about runes, so she asked him. Runes, or magic words, are mainly composed of ancient runes. How much do you know about this? Anduin had read some books on ancient runes before, so he answered honestly. I have read ancient runes for beginners and I also have a runes dictionary and magic pronunciation table. I can barely recognize all these words. Now if I refer to the dictionary, I can also do some simple translation, but I am still confused about how to combine ancient runes into runes. Anduin, your diligence and erudition are always so surprising. You now know more than most third-year students. In this case, how do you understand runes and runes? Lily looked at Anduin in surprise. Ancient runes are an elective course for third-year students. It is unexpected that someone knows so much in less than a year of enrollment. Anduin recalled what he had read in the book and added his own understanding, and said to Lily, as far as I know, ancient runes are a kind of magical writing, so they are also called magic words. The runes that exist in the magic world are said to be learned from the skeletons of some magical creatures. Some scholars also believe that this is a kind of writing created by God. After years of study and research, wizards gradually mastered their respective meanings and functions. In the course of history, many runes have been lost, and runes are made up of ancient runes through certain combinations. Runes have more specific and powerful magical abilities. In my understanding, if ancient runes are like letters, runes are like words. If ancient runes are words, runes are phrases or short sentences. Lily's eyes lit up after listening to Anduin's narration, and she nodded and said, It seems that you have a deep understanding of runeology. Indeed, most runes are composed of runes, and many spells are to translate single or multiple combinations of runes into spells. Anduin nodded to show that he understood. He also learned about this in Professor Flitwick's spell club. In addition, Senior Quirrell in the club also tried to invent a spell called Expanding Listening Spell, which is to continuously combine and modify runes and then translate them into spells. Lily nodded and continued, yes, if you want to study runes, you must first master and learn ancient runes. Moreover, the times are also developing. Many new runes have been discovered, or some lost characters have been restored by archaeologists. It was the first time that Anduin knew that new characters had been discovered, and he listened attentively. Lily was also very happy to see Anduin's focused expression. After all, teachers always like children who love to learn. She continued, similarly, many spells or runes have been passed down, but the runes that make up them have been lost. Many scholars are also working on restoration. Mr. Edgar Bones, whom you know, is a leader in this field. He once restored a new work from the ice-making spell. That work means lost, and he also developed several different rune combinations. Oh? This was the first time Anduin heard of this. He didn't expect that the bearded uncle he had met before had this ability. Lily continued, the research on the combination of runes into runes and the combination of runes is more advanced. Many runes themselves contain multiple meanings, just like this word. Lily drew a word on a piece of parchment and explained, this word itself means fly, but it also means leave and go. This is also one of the words that make up the floating spell. Anduin nodded and memorized the word. If you combine them in another way, you can form the comeback spell or the repelling spell. This word is also included in the rune combination of the Muggle repelling spell. It is a very practical word. Lily patiently explained to Anduin. For the runes or rune combinations that make up many spells and alchemical items, we usually have to first determine a core word, which we generally call the underlying word, and then combine other runes on the core word. The combination of magic runes is not like writing, which has the restriction of from left to right. The combination of runes varies. Some form a circle, some form a rectangle, and some even overlap. Many words are three-dimensional in themselves and need to be combined in 3 dimensions. At this time, we need to use a tool to study runes, that is, the rune workbench. Rune workbench. Anduin never thought that there were so many things in it, and if he wanted to study it in depth, he even had to use professional tools. Yes, I'll show you now. Lily took out her wand and tapped it lightly in the air. A cabinet-like piece of furniture in the study opened left and right, and a workbench decorated with exquisite hollow patterns stretched out from it. It looked like an exquisitely carved-out table, but the complex structure proved that it was definitely not that simple. Then, Lily took Anduin to sit in front of the workbench. When Anduin walked in and took a look, he found that the tabletop of this workbench was not flat. It was slightly concave as a whole, and there were many hollow places on it. A faint magic halo could be seen faintly. There was no need to think about it. This table could definitely not be used for writing. Next, I will demonstrate it to you. This is a very functional workbench with functions such as recording, materialization, combination, and testing. We can record some runes, including 3-dimensional characters, and materialization can call out the recorded characters, just like this. Lily read a sound, and then a rune appeared on the workbench. It was the word fly that Lily showed just now. Anduin couldn't help but marvel at the magic, not only for the workbench, but also for the complex knowledge of runology, which greatly broadened Anduin's horizons. Then we can try to make some combinations. Then Lily called out a few more words and skillfully combined them together. It looked like a relatively simple combination, composed entirely of planes, without forming a 3-dimensional combination. Chapter 64 Gift. This is the rune combination of the levitation spell, and then we will test it. Lily used her wand to touch the rune, and the rune composed of multiple runes lit up. Then she injected a stream of magic power through the wand, shot through the rune to a feather pen, and then the feather pen floated up. Anduin could clearly sense that Lily did not use the levitation spell, but the magic power passed through the rune and then acted on the feather pen, and then the levitation spell could be used. Anduin was amazed at what he saw. This was much more intuitive than learning runes from books. It was not over yet. Lily continued. There are many spells and runes that are very dangerous, or cannot be tested directly on the workbench. Some wizards with powerful skills can materialize runes through silent casting and then test them, but in the end, there are not many wizards who can master silent spells. So what if you can't cast silently? Lily took out something like a small crystal ball from the side of the workbench, and then approached the rune, and saw that the rune was sucked into the crystal ball. Anduin found 2 rows of crystal balls next to the workbench. At first, Anduin thought they were decorations, but he didn't expect them to be used to store runes. That's it. Save the runes and we can test them in other places. Lily smiled and explained to Anduin how to use the rune workbench. Anduin was really impressed and became very interested in rune research. During the days you stay here, you can use the workbench here. There are many words in it. You can learn by referring to the rune dictionary. I will also explain some common rune combinations to you, including the protection rune and stress rune in my amulet. Lily saw Anduin's eyes light up, and knew that he liked this workbench very much, so she said to Anduin. Anduin was overjoyed when he heard it, and said to Lily excitedly, "Really? Thank you so much." Lily smiled and nodded, and then explained to him how to use this rune workbench to do the work, and Anduin was also having a lot of fun. During this time, the Christmas gifts from his friends also arrived. Since Anduin had moved, the gifts were a little late. Although Vivian condemned Anduin's behavior of asking for gifts directly, she still gave him a set of magic talisman collection very considerately. Charles gave Anduin a poster of Ludo Bagman and said in the greeting card that he was very happy to receive the Mahjong tiles. He had basically taught them how to play Mahjong in their family these days, and he also gave him his favorite poster. Ludo Bagman was the star batsman of the Wingborne Wasps and Charles' idol, but Anduin could only say that he appreciated the gift. Professor McGonagall gave Anduin a scarf, which was said to be the team scarf of Professor McGonagall's favorite Appleby arrows. The scarf was light blue in color, with a silver arrow embroidered on each side. Anduin no longer expected any special gifts from Quidditch fans. Anduin even checked the Quidditch team that Professor McGonagall liked, and found that the team's most glorious record was defeating the then European champion Wurtzer Eagles in 1932. That game lasted for 16 days. Anduin even confirmed it again. A game lasted for 16 days. Is this really a joke? Professor Flitwick was very considerate and gave Anduin a copy of The Fifth Element. Exploration. He said in the greeting card that this was actually a 6th grade reading material, but he thought that with Anduin's current progress, he could already do some learning. Anduin was very happy with this gift. This was also Anduin's favorite gift besides Vivian's. When Anduin opened Professor Slughorn's gift, he seemed a little amused, because he was too familiar with this gift. It was a bottle of joy potion. Anduin guessed whether his dean had also brewed a lot of joy potions for bulk gifts. The gift from Hagrid was very simple, a leather cushion made of some unknown fur, very comfortable and warm to sit on, and Anduin used it immediately. After checking the gifts from several friends, Anduin sat on the fur cushion given by Hagrid and continued to study brain occlumency. This magic and legitimate mind seem to complement each other. After learning brain occlumency, legitimate mind will be easier to master. This kind of magic is recorded in books such as Magical Defensor Theory and Mystery of Magical Defensor. This magic has certain requirements for the learner's willpower and psychological quality. When practicing, you need to empty your mind and keep a calm and peaceful mental state. Then operate and control the magic power, merge your thoughts with the magic power, and wrap the brain with the fuse power. In this way, you can defend against many mind reading and mind perception magic. This kind of magic that does not require chanting is very difficult for most wizards because it requires good self-control. The easiest way to learn this kind of magic is to ask a legilimency master to cooperate, constantly perform legilimency on the learner, and then passively try to defend. Through continuous training, the learner can become familiar with the process of closing the brain in the process of defending legilimency. But Anduin does not intend to do this. First of all, he does not know a legilimency master, and secondly, he does not want people to peek into his thoughts at will. In the various magic books that Anduin has read, several methods are introduced, including potion practice method, passive practice method, self-imagination method, etc. The passive practice method is to let the legilimency master invade the brain, and then feel this process in passive defensor. This method has been passed by Anduin. The potion practice method requires drinking a tranquilizer in advance and then trying to practice. This method can be considered, and Anduin has tranquilizers. The last and most difficult method is the self-imagination method, which Anduin himself calls the visualization method. That is, after emptying the mind, imagine another self in the mind, and give yourself various appearances. For example, in the magic defense theory, it is recorded that someone imagined himself as a dragon, and then tried to use magic to immerse himself in consciousness. Anduin thought for a while and decided to try the visualization method first. After all, he has a strong ability to control magic and a firm will. He has been practicing and meditating for a long time, which also gave him his own experience in regulating his thoughts. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 65 Occlumency. He did what he said. Anduin first adjusted his breathing constantly, then stood up and took a Hunyuan stance, which is the basic stance of Tai Chi. When standing in the stance, most of the energy needs to be used to adjust the body posture. One of the key points of standing in this stance is to find the most coordinated position of neck, waist, hip, and foot, and then maintain it. This is also the way Anduin usually uses to calm down and adjust his mentality. After standing in the stance, Anduin constantly adjusted some subtle postures of various parts of his body according to instinct. In this process, his brain was almost completely empty, without any distracting thoughts. Then he mobilized the magic power, which slowly flowed into his brain, and then he kept trying to let the magic power immerse into his consciousness, which was also the most difficult point. Anduin tried to use the visualization method. He did not visualize himself as a strange creature in his mind, but visualized himself as a black hole without any light. Then he kept trying to absorb the magic power into it. Thanks to Anduin's usual practice, he entered into a state of meditation very quickly, and it was not difficult for him to mobilize magic power. It was just that Anduin tried several times in the visualization stage, but he succeeded in the end. Half an hour later, Anduin ended this attempt and slowly opened his eyes. After the end, Anduin was very surprised at his state when he recalled the practice process. He was not surprised that Anduin's attempt was ineffective. He had never thought that he could learn this difficult magic so quickly at the beginning. Anduin was surprised that maybe it seemed that he succeeded in operating the brain block spell in the first practice. Comparing with the description of the successful brain block spell in the magic book, Anduin confirmed that he really got the entry of this difficult magic. During the practice, Anduin's progress can almost be described as a natural process. In the visualization, he turned into a black hole, and then remotely controlled the magic power to slowly immerse. This process was almost not difficult, and then when he tried to wrap his mind with this magic power, he also completed it very smoothly. This rapid training speed only happened to Anduin when he was learning the levitation spell. Although it was relatively easy for him to learn other spells, it also required repeated practice to get started. And the brain block was just like learning the levitation spell. He got started easily the first time. Am I a genius in learning the brain block? Or is there really a bonus of talent in the academy, or is it that the usual training and practice have a bonus for learning this kind of magic? Just like I used to practice superpowers for many years, so standing and meditating not only regulates the mind and emotions, but also has an auxiliary effect on this kind of spiritual magic. Anduin thought about various possibilities, as if he had grasped something, but it seemed that he didn't grasp it completely. Shaking his head, Anduin forced himself to empty these thoughts. Anyway, the practice was successful. He should learn it completely before thinking about other things. Then, Anduin tried to operate the brain block to see, but perhaps because he was not proficient, the process of magic operation was very obscure. Anduin let out a sigh of relief. It seems that more practice is needed to use the brain block anytime and anywhere. This successful experience made Anduin very excited, so he decided to practice occlumency every night. After mastering this magic, he would try legilimency. Anduin had a hunch that maybe practicing legilimency would be as easy as occlumency. In the following days, in addition to practicing during the day, Anduin helped out in the potter's house, and then learned runes and rune knowledge on the rune table. At night, he stayed in his room to practice occlumency. A week passed quickly, and it was time to go back to school. Anduin packed his luggage. Since he had the space back given by Cyrus, Anduin finally didn't have to drag large boxes of luggage. This vacation, Anduin gained a lot. The rune knowledge he learned in the past few days was enough for him to digest for a while. After packing up happily, Anduin prepared to go downstairs to have the last breakfast with the Potters, and then say goodbye to them. Anduin, have you packed your luggage? Come sit down and have something to eat. We have a surprise for you later." Lily greeted Anduin, who was dressed neatly, coming downstairs. Anduin didn't understand what was going on, but he still obediently went into the restaurant and ate breakfast while teasing Harry. During this week, Harry seemed to be familiar with this strange big brother and always played with him happily. Anduin held an apple and teased Harry. Little Harry wanted to grab it but couldn't, and he was so anxious that he almost cried. In the end, Anduin stuffed the apple in his hand into Harry's arms. James, who was standing by, couldn't help but smile knowingly when he saw the two guys getting along so well. He said to Anduin, "Anduin, you're going back to Hogwarts today. Lily and I have prepared a gift for you. I think you'll like it." Anduin was puzzled and said, "Gift, but I've already received your Christmas presents. I like them very much. Why do you want to give me another gift?" At this time, Lily also came in with a package and said to Anduin with a smile, "This is a gift to thank you. You have been taking care of and protecting Harry in the battles in the past few days. I see that you are so interested in rune research, so James and I prepared this gift for you." Anduin was about to refuse when he was interrupted by Lily. "Don't be in a hurry to refuse. Open it and see what it is first." After that, Lily opened the package in her hand, and saw a round plate the size of a wash basin inside. It looked like stone and had a bit of metal texture. There was also a book on the round plate. James explained, "I heard from Lily that you're very interested in studying runes, so I prepared this. This is a rune disc, which functions similarly to a rune workbench. Although it's not as effective as a workbench, it can be used to learn runes and try to combine runes." Lily on the side also said, "Yes, this rune disc is like a simple rune workbench. It has the functions of materialization and combination, but it can't record and test." Then Lily took out the magic book on it and said, "This is a magic rune collection tool book. It's blank and can record 100 words and 10 runes. I have stored more than 40 common 3-dimensional magic runes in it. Generally, 2-dimensional magic runes do not need to be included. In the future, if you encounter 3-dimensional magic runes that you want to record, you can also record them in this book." Chapter 66 Return to School. However, since there is no crystal ball for storage, there is no way to test it. However, I believe it is enough for learning and some simple research. How about it? Do you like it? Lily smiled slightly and slowly explained to Anduin. When Anduin heard that the two of them wanted to give him such an expensive gift, he actually wanted to refuse, but he couldn't control the psychological desire deep in his heart. As a result, the law of true fragrance took over again. After receiving the rune disc, Anduin restrained his desire to study it right away. After putting it away, he kept thanking the Potters. "Okay Anduin, don't be so polite to us. It's getting late. I'll take you to the train station now," James said to Anduin with a smile. So, Anduin ended his Christmas vacation and the happy time with Cyrus and the Potters, and got up to return to Hogwarts. After saying goodbye to James at the station, Anduin boarded the return train. In the carriage, Vivian and Charles had already arrived. They were sharing the snacks that Vivian brought back from France. When Anduin came in, Charles happily pulled Anduin to sit down. "Hey, Anduin, I heard from my aunt that you were really amazing." Charles was about to discuss the news with Anduin, but Anduin interrupted him with his eyes and shook his head at him, so he had to shut up silently. "What are you talking about? What's amazing?" Vivian saw Anduin interrupting Charles, her eyes narrowed involuntarily, and she couldn't help asking. "Nothing, I won a big prize at Christmas, nothing to brag about." Anduin didn't want to talk about the battle with the Death Eaters everywhere. You know, he is still in Slytherin College now. Telling Vivian, the big speaker, will make the whole school know. "Oh, really?" Vivian obviously didn't believe it, and looked at Charles with a questioning look. When Charles saw Vivian staring at him, he had to use the excuse that his friends from the academy were waiting for him and ran away quietly. HMPH. Vivian snorted in dissatisfaction, but when she saw Anduin flipping through a book and reading it as if nothing had happened, she had to give up. But after a while, Vivian forgot about it and started chatting with Anduin about what she saw and heard in France. The two of them ate snacks and chatted, and took the steam train back to Hogwarts. After returning to Hogwarts, Anduin returned to his previous ghost-like life, but made some changes to his daily study plan. Since those powerful spells could not be practiced at the moment, Anduin reallocated his time, using part of the time to practice some basic spells and transfiguration, and most of the rest of the time to use the rune disc to study magic and runes, and taking 30 to 40 minutes in the evening to practice brain occlusion. The next day after returning to Hogwarts, Anduin couldn't help but run to find Hagrid. This time he specially bought a lot of various condiments and prepared to have a few more meals happily at Hagrid's place. Hagrid's hut was now covered in snow, with thick snow on the roof. When he walked in, he found no one inside, not even Ryan, so he walked to the fireplace and lit a fire. He was very familiar with this place, so he was not polite. The bonfire in the fireplace was burning, constantly expelling the cold air in the house. Anduin boiled a pot of water on the stove next to it and made a cup of tea. When pouring the water, he saw that Hagrid really used the big copper cup he gave him. He thought the size was quite suitable. Holding the teacup, Anduin sat on the sofa next to the bonfire like an old man, listening to the crackling of pine wood burning in the fireplace, and a sense of tranquility surged in his heart. He read a book, tasted tea, and enjoyed the warmth brought by the fire, while spending time comfortably. After an unknown amount of time, a dog barked outside the hut. Anduin knew it was Hagrid who had returned. The quiet and comfortable feeling just now made Anduin very comfortable, causing him to even forget the passage of time. It was dark outside. "Hi, Anduin, you're back." Hagrid walked into the house carrying a huge object, and just saw Anduin sitting by the fire, smiling and greeting him. His Ryan saw this old acquaintance and ran up excitedly to rub Anduin's feet. "Well, I just came back yesterday. Today is the weekend and school starts tomorrow, so I came here after lunch. Where have you been? Why did you take so long to come back?" Hagrid shook off the snow on his body, unloaded a large piece of stuff on his shoulder onto the table in the room, and said with a smile, "You came at the right time. Professor Kettleburn had cultivated a herd of reem cattle in the Forbidden Forest before. Today, a cow died, so Professor Kettleburn asked me to help. Look, the professor also gave me a large piece of beef." Anduin went forward to take a closer look and found that it was really a large piece. From the structure of this piece of meat, it is actually a whole cow leg with a little bit of the cow body, but the size is at least half a cow. Is that reem cattle big? Can this kind of animal be raised in the Forbidden Forest? How many animals does Professor Kettleburn raise in the Forbidden Forest? Why does Anduin feel that this professor of magical animal protection is like a farmer, raising a bunch of edible magical animals, just like the Tibo warthog last time? The professor has indeed raised quite a few. There are already quite a few magical animal communities in the Forbidden Forest, such as thestrals, hippogriffs, unicorns, etc. At the same time, the professor has also cultivated quite a few magical biological communities, such as reem cattle, Tibo warthogs, horned camels, and moon idiots. Every year these little guys cause quite a lot of trouble, and Professor Kettleburn is really worried about them. Hagrid said as he took off his coat. The professor said that breeding and cultivation are to restore these populations. Many magical creatures are in danger because they have many high-value resources, so they are easily overhunted, but the professor thinks this is too short-sighted. Only after the population is cultivated and expanded, the resources of magical creatures will be continuously produced. Hagrid repeated Professor Kettleburn's words. Anduin nodded in approval. It seems that this professor also understands the principle of sustainable development. "I'm exhausted today. This cow is bigger than 3 normal cows. Its blood is the main material for making strengthening potions. It took the professor and I half a day to deal with this corpse." Hagrid grabbed the copper cup next to him and drank the full cup of water. Anduin studied the big piece of beef and said, "Hey, it's just right. Now that we had beef, I'll treat you to a beef hot pot." Chapter 67 Anduin's Forbidden Forest Hut Hot Pot? What is that? Hagrid asked in confusion after hearing the unfamiliar words. "It's just delicious food. Just wait. Let me deal with the beef first," Anduin said confidently. Then, Anduin took out his wand and directed the knives in Hagrid's room to cut up the beef. There was so much meat that he couldn't eat it all at once. He first sliced 4 large plates of beef slices, and then hung the remaining beef outside the hut to freeze. Then he took out the big copper pot he bought in Chinatown from the linen space bag. Anduin didn't expect to use it so soon. He picked up a few pieces of charcoal from the stove, put them in the copper pot in the center of the pot, added water, cut some green onions and ginger, and put them in to cook. It was done. Anduin took out his chopsticks and said to Hagrid, "Okay, when the water boils, we'll put the meat in and dip it, then add the sauce I made, and it'll be ready." Hagrid also sat at the table with a fork in his hand and said, "So simple. Is there any difference between this and ordinary boiling water?" "You'll know if you try it," Anduin said without saying much, smiling. Then Hagrid began his first hot pot journey. The ordinary meat slices, paired with the sesame sauce prepared by Anduin, instantly gave off a complex aroma that rushed his taste buds, making Hagrid keep shouting with excitement. The two kept eating hot pot and enjoying it. After the meal, Hagrid burped contentedly and said, "Anduin, you know so much. It would be nice if you could live here." The speaker is unintentional, but the listener is intentional. When Anduin heard this, he had some ideas. It seemed that it was not impossible. Usually, except for classes, he basically stayed in the room at the Slytherin Lounge, staying underground there every day. Although the scenery of the lake was nice, it was not as good as the wide view here. He could also enjoy the campfire food. It seemed that it would be nice to live here occasionally. So Anduin said to Hagrid, "It's not impossible to stay at your place occasionally. The place is big and it's convenient for me to practice spells and martial arts. But you only have one house. Where can I sleep if I live here?" When Hagrid heard that Anduin wanted to live here, he was very excited to think that someone would accompany him. He said, "It's okay. I can open another room for you next door. There are many trees in the Forbidden Forest. It won't take a few days to make a room for you." Anduin thought about it and it seemed okay, so he nodded and said, "Okay, I will come to help in the afternoon starting tomorrow. I will move in to accompany you after the small house is built. Although I can't stay here every day, it's okay to stay here 2 or 3 days a week." Hagrid nodded and agreed when he heard it. You know, he stayed here to guard the Forbidden Forest. In addition to raising some small animals to accompany him, Professor Kettleburn would occasionally come to see him. Although he also stayed in Hogwarts, he was not ordinary bored. After the discussion, Anduin went straight back to the castle. The next day, at about 3:00 p.m., Anduin ran to Hagrid's hut after finishing his class. When Anduin arrived outside the hut, he found that Hagrid had already cut a lot of wood and stones and piled them next to it, while Hagrid himself was cleaning the lab next to the hut and had leveled the ground of more than 10 square meters. It seemed that he was more active than Anduin. Seeing this, Anduin hurried forward to help, and together they cleaned the surrounding ground, and then used the cutting spell to cut 4 thick logs, inserted them into the 4 corners of the leveled ground, and then used magic to lift the stones on the side one by one, arranging them in a long line to cover the ground, and then used the cutting spell to level the ground to ensure that there were no bumps and bumps. After all, it was not bricks, so the flatness could not be guaranteed. Then, the outer wall was built. The wood was cut and laid on the ground tightly. Hagrid took nails and hammers to nail the wallboard. After the horizontal and vertical boards were nailed, Anduin used the floating spell to control the wallboard to stand on 2 wooden stakes. Hagrid then nailed the wallboard and the wooden stakes. In this way, 1 wall was completed. After repeating it 3 times, the 4 walls were installed. One of the walls was nailed directly to Hagrid's hut because it was attached to Hagrid's hut. After finishing all this, it was evening. Anduin followed the same method and had a hot pot with Hagrid before returning to the castle. In the next few days, after class, he went to Hagrid's house to help build the house, the roof, the indoor fireplace, the wooden floor, the door, and the window. Hagrid was also very considerate to build a small balcony outside Anduin's room, so that he could sit outside the room to rest or have afternoon tea. There are 2 doors in the room, one leading directly to the outside. After going out through the balcony with eaves, walking down a 3-step wooden staircase, you will find Hagrid's vegetable garden. The other door leads directly to Hagrid's house. Hagrid made a lot of furniture for Anduin's small room by himself. Hagrid's woodworking skills are really amazing. He also helped to lay the leather carpet. Soon, the room was completed. Anduin also lived next door to Hagrid. The style of the room was very similar to Hagrid's hut. Whether it was the bed, the table and the chair, or the wardrobe, it gave people a rough feeling. The carpet and the bed were also made of fur products. The whole hut gave people the feeling of a hunter's hut. Since Anduin ran to live with Hagrid from time to time, Anduin's figure was even more difficult to find in Hogwarts. Even Vivian sometimes couldn't find him. Except for suddenly appearing from nowhere during class, he was not seen even at mealtime. After finishing the History of Magic class, Anduin did not go back to Hagrid's hut, but went upstairs and walked into the boys' bathroom, where someone was waiting for him. "Randall, you are very punctual." Anduin looked at Randall Rosier in front of him and said with a slight smile, Anduin, what do you want to let me go?" Rosier looked at Anduin with fear in his eyes. Anduin walked forward, put a hand on Rosier's shoulder, smiled and said, "Don't make me sound like a devil. You see, I didn't treat you badly, did you? Wasn't your eldest brother killed? This way, your inheritance order in the family will be improved. By the way, have you brought the protection fee for this month? Rosia, who was being held on the shoulder, was already very nervous. After hearing what Anduin said, he began to tremble with panic. He said tremblingly, Evan's death is indeed related to you. His affairs caused a big uproar in the family. How can I have the time to think about inheritance? I really have no money. I took the risk of taking a few magic books from the family. See if you can pay off the debt. I've been addicted to playing Magic Awakening these past 2 days. Is there anyone who wants to join me? I'm very good at history of magic. Chapter 68. Blood Potion. After that, he handed a few books to Anduin. Anduin took them and roughly flipped through them. He found that there were 4 books he had never seen before. 2 of them were about black magic, 1 was about potions, and 1 was actually a rune atlas, which recorded many rare rune combination formulas. Not bad, these 4 books will be your protection fee for 4 months. I will return the original to you after I copy them. What do you think? I am still very kind. Anduin said happily. Hearing Anduin's words, Rosia's uneasy heart was half relieved, and he nodded in agreement. By the way, what about Travs? Hasn't he thought about making trouble for me recently? You know, I let him lie in the owl shed for an afternoon. Anduin put the book away and asked with a smile. He has tried to make trouble for you more than once, but you are elusive every day except for class time, and he can't find you at all. Recently, he has been hanging out with seniors Wilkes and Yaxley, thinking about how to deal with Gryffindor all day long. Rosia said truthfully. Anduin thought about it and realized that he had rarely stayed in the castle recently. He basically went back to the Forbidden Forest Lodge to study magic after class. As for the conflict between them and Gryffindor, Anduin did not intend to intervene. He had thought that their fight would be bloody, and he even went to remind Charles once. Later, he found that children were really children, and fighting was just like a prank. After that, Anduin was too lazy to get involved. Okay, Rosia, you've done a good job. If you have any trouble, you can tell me. The protection fee will not be paid in vain. I will protect you in the future. Anduin said. Rosia was too busy hiding from Anduin to dare to find him actively. He could only deal with him a few words, just wanting to get rid of this guy as soon as possible. After the two broke up, Anduin returned to the cabin and looked through Rosia's books. Sure enough, the knowledge passed down by those big families with a long history is the greatest heritage. Do they even have blood magic? Anduin read through it carefully and gained a lot. One of the black magic books recorded a lot of blood magic knowledge. In that potion book, there was even a recipe for the blood madness potion. The blood madness potion, whose full name is Dragon Blood Madness, is made from dragon blood. It is made by contaminating dragon blood with many vicious raw materials and then boiling it. It is a forbidden drug that is expressly prohibited. After taking it, it can make people have a similar effect of rage, and the resistance to spells can also be greatly increased. The power and control of spells will also be greatly enhanced, but the side effects are also very obvious. After the effect of the drug ends, there will be obvious blood loss, and there is a certain probability that people will go crazy and lose their minds. No wonder Evan Rosia has this potion, but dare to drink this potion, should I say you would break or have a hole in your brain? After reading the description of this potion, Anduin smiled sarcastically. Next, Anduin prepared to copy the magic books. It was not advisable to copy directly with the copy spell, because the copies would disappear after the magic power dissipated. The proper way was to prepare a blank book or parchment, as well as ink, and copy the text with the text copy spell, so that the books could be preserved for a long time. After working for a long time, Anduin finally copied all 4 books with the spell. He could practice spells during the copying process, which was not boring for Anduin. Fortunately, this was not the kind of magic with magic power. Most of the magic books were unique, and one had to be familiar with spell removal and alchemy to successfully copy them. Anduin heard that there was a book called Sonnets of the Wizard, which would even curse the person who read it. The person who read this book could only speak in 5-line limericks for the rest of his life. It seemed that he had to speed up the study of magic runes and runes. If he wanted to learn how to remove spells and break curses, this knowledge was essential, so as not to be harmed by a cursed book one day. With a plan in mind, Anduin began to study the boring runes again, constantly using the rune disc to materialize the runes, and learning to combine the various common runes in the magic rune collection. This method not only allows him to understand the meaning and concepts of various rooms more thoroughly, but also allows him to have a deeper understanding of these spells. When analyzing the obstacle spell before, Anduin felt that he had a deeper understanding of the obstacle spell. When casting the spell, he was more solid in control and it became much easier to shape it. Now Anduin can condense the obstacles into a fist-sized ball. Anduin calls it an obstacle ball. The power is greatly increased when it is launched. Recently, he is still studying whether it is possible to make the shaped obstacle ball explode when launching the obstacle ball. 2 weeks later, in a transfiguration class, Professor McGonagall was explaining the differences and precautions between the transfiguration spell and the conversion spell. Anduin concluded that the transfiguration spell is the overall deformation, and the conversion spell is the partial deformation, but Professor McGonagall still talked about it for an hour. Okay, this class ends here. In the next class, you'll start to try to transform a mouse into a snuff box. This requires very hard practice. Maybe this will be the question for your final exam. Professor McGonagall finally finished her transformation spell. Anduin was speechless about Professor McGonagall's behavior of revealing the question. Maybe, isn't it a confirmation if you say so? Just as he was about to pack up and go back to the cabin, Professor McGonagall called him. After other students had left, Professor McGonagall said to Anduin, "Anduin, Headmaster Dumbledore is looking for you." Anduin heard this and guessed that it might be a reward from the Ministry of Magic. He couldn't help but feel happy and said with a smile, "Yes, Professor McGonagall, I'll be there right away." Well, the password to the principal's office is this: be candy. After Professor McGonagall finished speaking, she thought for a while and said, "Anduin, I heard about what happened at Christmas. Your courage is amazing, but as a professor, I still have to remind you to pay attention to your own safety. In this situation, it's not something a little wizard like you should get involved in." Professor McGonagall spoke to Anduin with a serious face. Anduin knew that Professor McGonagall was worried about him, so he smiled and nodded and said, "Don't worry, Professor, I won't put myself in danger rashly, but when danger comes, calmness and decisiveness can better protect yourself." McGonagall knew that Anduin was very rational, but as an elder, she always wanted to say a few words to the young. After hearing Anduin's answer, she nodded and said, "Okay, go, Dumbledore is in the office now." Chapter 69. Buffet Brain Refresher. Anduin said goodbye to Professor McGonagall and walked up the main tower. He found a gargoyle on the 8th floor. After reciting the command that Professor McGonagall had taught him, the gargoyle jumped aside and the stone wall behind it split in two, revealing a spiral staircase that slowly went up. When Anduin walked into the office, Dumbledore was standing behind that door, teasing a beautiful fiery red bird on a branch. It looked very similar to the phoenix he had seen in the atlas. At this time, Dumbledore turned around, smiled at Anduin, and said, "I'm sorry, Fawkes has always felt lonely recently. I don't spend much time in the office, so I was only busy with it and didn't notice you. I just came into, Mr. Principal. Is Fawkes a phoenix? It looks very similar to the portrait of a phoenix I saw in the atlas." Anduin smiled at Principal Dumbledore and asked curiously, "Yes, your observation is very sharp. As a phoenix, it is very sensitive, which makes it very difficult for an old man like me." Dumbledore teased Fawkes playfully, but Fawkes turned his head away coldly, seemingly not liking Dumbledore's teasing, so the headmaster could only shrug to ease the embarrassment. Anduin found it very interesting to see that this phoenix had such rich emotional expressions, and couldn't help but look at Fawkes a few more times. Okay, it's still very shy. Staring at it for a long time will make it embarrassed. Come and sit down. Dumbledore saw that Fawkes didn't pay much attention to Anduin, so he spoke. "It's quite arrogant," Anduin silently complained in his heart, and followed Dumbledore to sit down at the desk. This is when Anduin had time to take a closer look at the headmaster's office. It is a spacious and beautiful round room. Portraits of former headmasters and headmistresses are hung on the wall behind the desk. At this time, the people in the portrait were in different postures. Some were thinking with their heads down, some were taking a nap with their eyes closed, and some were not in the frame at all. One of them saw Anduin looking at him and glared at him. "Would you like some candy first? I'm addicted to lemon sherbet recently. The sweet and sour taste always reminds me of my youth." Dumbledore smiled and took out a candy jar from the cabinet next to him and recommended it to Anduin. "Thank you, Professor, but I prefer chocolate more. In our Muggle world, there is a saying, the more people like to recall the past, the older they are you look young. Maybe you can spend more time thinking about the future." Anduin declined the candy jar handed over by Dumbledore. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "What a wise saying. I can see that you have your own ideas, so I can't force you." After that, he took back the candy jar and took a handful of candy from it and stuffed it into his mouth. Does this headmaster love sweets so much? There are sweets in the room, and the password to the headmaster's office is also sweets, Anduin guessed in his heart. Let's talk about business. You should have thought about why I called you here. The commendation order from the Ministry of Magic has been sent, and it's just right for you to take a look. Dumbledore smiled and took out a piece of parchment printed with the words of the Ministry of Magic and handed it to Anduin. Anduin took it and looked at it. The whole article was about thanking and commending Anduin for his brave assistance in fighting and arresting Death Eaters during Christmas. Anduin quickly skipped the above content and looked at the reward content. Mr. Anduin Wilson is hereby rewarded with a silver medal of bravery from the British Ministry of Magic and 500 gold galleons. Okay, that's good. Anduin couldn't help but have a good impression of the Ministry of Magic, and he also admired the efficiency of Minister Millicent Barnold. It really deserves to be a good minister in the magic world. Anduin, who was in a good mood, couldn't help but blow Minister Barnold's rainbow fart in his heart, and couldn't help laughing. Seeing Anduin laughing, Dumbledore did not interrupt him. After a while, he took out a small box wrapped in exquisite velvet and a large bag of gold galleons, and said to Anduin, "Come on, our little hero, this is the prize given to you by the Ministry of Magic." Anduin took it immediately. Needless to say, the weight of the gold galleons gave people a sense of security. He did not open the leather bag to check it out, but put it aside. He first opened the box containing the medal. Inside lay a round silver medal connected by a short dark ribbon. It was engraved with exquisite patterns and a capital M in the center of the badge, symbolizing the Ministry of Magic. Originally, the Minister of Magic was going to present it to you personally. After all, she believes that some young people are needed as role models. However, under my persuasion, Millicent agreed to your request and will not make it public for the time being. However, if there is a chance in the future, she may still make it public. Dumbledore saw Anduin playing with the medal excitedly and said with a slight smile, "Thank you, Professor. Please also thank the Minister for me. I am very satisfied with the current situation." Anduin was still excited and said to Dumbledore with a smile, "Well, by the way, there is another gift for you. This is a gift from a friend who does not want to reveal his name." Dumbledore nodded first, and then seemed to suddenly remember something. He took out a crystal bottle from the drawer next to him and handed it to Anduin. Anduin took it and saw that it was a bottle of potion. The crystal bottle containing the potion was very delicate, and it was completely different from the glass potion bottle he usually used to make medicine. He looked at Dumbledore in confusion. "This is Barfay's Brain Wakener, which is a very difficult potion to make. I checked it and there is no problem. It should be said to be very good. It can significantly enhance the brain power of the user, but the effect is very strong. Pour half an ounce into water every day and take it. Taking too much will cause headaches, nausea and even coma," Dumbledore said. Anduin was shocked to hear that this was the famous Barfay brain-stimulating potion. This potion would cost at least hundreds of gold galleons on the market, and it was still in a state of being out of stock because it was very difficult to make and the materials were very rare. Once there was any mistake in the production process, it could easily become a poison that could turn people into fools. Who could give such a potion to others? This potion is too expensive. Can I know who gave it to me?" Anduin looked at the crystal bottle in his hand solemnly, and then couldn't help asking Dumbledore. Chapter 70 Safety. The person who gave this potion did not want to reveal his name, so I can only keep it a secret. He gave it as a gift out of kindness. If you don't want to accept it, I think it will make him sad. Dumbledore did not reveal Snape's intention. After all, his identity now needs to be kept completely secret. I understand. Thank you. Please thank that friend for me. Anduin was not hypocritical. Since the other party insisted on giving it to him, it would be a loss of face if he did not accept it. He was not that kind of person. Of course, he could not bear to let Anduin refuse such a powerful potion. It was really too fragrant. I will tell that friend. The Potters and Cyrus asked about your recent situation a few days ago. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to stay in the office to care about the students for a long time. Do you have any words to tell them? Dumbledore has been traveling back and forth for a long time. He is either lobbying the members of the Wizengamot Council or discussing countermeasures with the elders of the Order of the Phoenix. Most of the time when he returns to the office, he is writing the letters, reading the letters, monitoring the movements of the Death Eaters, etc. Dealing with the Dark Lord has indeed consumed a lot of his energy. After hearing what Dumbledore said, Anduin also found that he had not communicated with several friends for a long time, so he said, "Can you give a message to Cyrus for me? Just tell him not to dirty the room that I spent a lot of time cleaning up." Dumbledore nodded with a smile. "Also, tell the Potters that I'm doing fine lately and that I'm grateful for the gifts they sent me. At the same time, be careful and beware of being targeted by the Death Eaters." Anduin didn't know if his appearance had changed history. In his understanding, the Potters might have died in the previous Christmas attack in the original plot, but he was still very worried about Lily's safety. He had said similar things many times when he lived with Lily, but for them, it was normal to fight against the Dark Lord and face danger. He didn't know if they listened. If a Dumbledore could remind them as well, it might be more effective. "Oh? Why do you think the Potters would be targeted by the Death Eaters?" Dumbledore raised his eyebrows and looked at Anduin thoughtfully. Anduin told the truth. "It's very simple. During the attack on Christmas, some Death Eaters ignored the front battlefield and sneaked in to attack Lily and Alice. This is really strange. One of the Death Eaters even took a blood madness potion during the battle. Under the circumstances at the time, if they appeared on the front battlefield and took that potion, it might be possible to turn the tide of the battle. So I have considered that those Death Eaters were coming for Lily or Alice." After listening to Anduin's reasoning, Dumbledore nodded in admiration and said, "Then how do you know they are not coming for someone else?" Anduin was very puzzled when he heard Dumbledore ask this. At the time, there was only me, Augusta, Lily, Alice, and their 2 children at the scene. If it was for me and Augusta, there would be no need to go to so much trouble. As for the 2 children, there is no need to target them. Dumbledore considered that Anduin was able to draw such a conclusion without knowing the inside story, which proved his wisdom. He then nodded to Anduin and said, "Well, don't worry, I have also considered this. They will be safe, I promise." Anduin heard what Dumbledore said and thought that there should be no problem, so he said goodbye to Dumbledore and returned to the Forbidden Forest hut. "Very smart little wizard, what do you think, Albus? You are worthy at being a student of Slytherin." After Anduin left, a portrait on the wall of the office spoke. If Anduin was still here, he would find that this was the painting that had glared at him before. Dumbledore nodded and said, "That's true, but Finns, this little wizard from Slytherin is of Muggle origin." Finns on the wall widened his eyes and said, "That's impossible. How could Slytherin accept a wizard of Muggle descent? You must have made a mistake. His ancestors must have noble blood flowing in their veins." "That's not necessarily true. I remember that when I was in office, there was a Muggle wizard who entered Slytherin. It's not that there were none at all, but it was just that there were very few." A portrait across several frames from Finns spoke. "Shut up, Dexter, I won't allow you to tarnish the glory of Slytherin." Finns glared and yelled. Dumbledore, who was still sitting in the chair, listened to the former headmasters arguing there, and acted like a bystander, reaching out to grab a handful of candy and chewing it slowly. Time flies, the ice and snow melt, and spring comes to Hogwarts. In addition to learning spells and runes every day, Anduin has another job, which is to accompany Hagrid to cultivate the vegetable garden outside the cottage. Anduin asked Hagrid to buy a lot of vegetable seedlings and plant them together in the small vegetable garden. Hogwarts is about to usher in the Easter holiday, which will also last for 2 weeks. Anduin once wrote to Cyrus and Lily to ask if he could visit during the holiday. But the letters sent to the Potter family have not been delivered recently, as if the owls could not find their location, and Anduin somehow could not remember the address of Lily's house. Cyrus did reply in time, but he seemed to be very busy this Easter, and told Anduin not to go to his previous residence, which was no longer safe. Anduin asked Cyrus about Lily's news. Cyrus just told him that Lily's family had been placed in a safe place and no one could find them. This made Anduin feel relieved. At this time, Anduin also realized that it was possible that the Potter family had been hidden by Dumbledore with magic, otherwise it would be impossible to explain why Anduin inexplicably forgot the address of Lily's family. In this way, Anduin decided to stay in school during the Easter holiday and no longer go out of school. "I have completely learned the brain block technique. If I feel it is correct, I will soon be able to reach the level of proficiency. The rest of the self-defense spells have also been practiced to the level of proficiency. The research topics of the spell club can also be tried to develop." Anduin, who decided to stay in school, considered the arrangements during the holiday. In the recent spell club, Senior Quirrell's amplification spell has progressed very quickly. It can already clearly enhance the sound reception and can receive sound in a fixed point and direction. However, the spell he developed is just as Anduin expected. It is too long to recite it in one breath. He can't develop a spell that requires a breath to recite. Chapter 71 Final. Often after a new spell is developed, it takes a long time to streamline a spell. Sometimes a practical spell will go through several years, more than 10 years, or even several generations of streamlining before it can adapt to the public and spread widely. Senior Vanessa's research on the extraction spell has also made some progress. The technique she developed to enhance the accuracy of spellcasting, which Anduin called precise control, requires strong magical perception and control to perform. Currently, only some senior students in the spell club can successfully cast it. Anduin thinks that this casting technique is very valuable and can even be applied to many other spells. His previous advancement of the levitation spell to the extraordinary realm is not unrelated to his mastery of this technique. Anduin has decided on his own research topic for spells, which is the development ideas and application directions of sound wave spells. First of all, he has mastered the spells related to sound, such as loud voice, whispering, and closing ears. Secondly, the related magic runes and rooms are not complicated, and he has included them here. The expansion spell developed by Senior Quirrell is also a sound wave spell, which can be used as a reference. He tried two research directions. One is ultrasound. He used its good directionality and high frequency, and then imitated the characteristics of bats to develop a spell that can be located by echo. In this way, after using this spell, it is like unfolding a directional radar, which helps to identify the environment and search for enemies. Even if the body spell is used, it will be found. The other direction is infrasound. Strong infrasound has strong lethality and strong penetration. After being received by the human body, symptoms such as dizziness and nausea will appear. If the intensity is strong enough, it can even cause death. If a spell that can use infrasound can be developed, it is equivalent to developing a powerful AoE skill with interference and killing performance. For Senior Quirrell, without the aid of the rune disc, he can only draw the magic runes on paper, combine the runes, and then translate the runes into spells to test whether the spell is useful. Compared with Senior Quirrell, Anduin has a strong advantage in developing spells, that is, he has a strong perception and control of magic power, and has experience in silent casting, so he does not need to translate the runes into spells to test, and he has a rune disc, which is much more efficient. Therefore, during the Easter period, Anduin hardly left his house, while analyzing the runes of sonic spells on the rune disc, and sketching the rune formula on parchment. At the same time, Anduin also began to take the Buffy Brain Refresher regularly and quantitatively. The effect is very obvious. Anduin can clearly feel that his thinking speed has become faster, and his memory and reaction ability have gradually become stronger, which greatly increases his efficiency in learning and researching magic. Anduin learned from many potion books that it is best to take the Buffy Brain Refresher when you are working with your brain. If you take it regularly, it will also have a good effect. However, if you do not use your brain often, the effect will gradually dissipate over time. Only if you think and remember more during the period of taking it, will you still maintain a strong gain effect after the time of taking it has passed. This is a bit like protein powder. If you take it regularly, you will gain weight inexplicably. If you don't take it, you will slowly lose weight. Only when you eat and exercise at the same time, it will quickly turn into muscle. After the War of the Magic World experienced the Christmas War, there were no major battles, only sporadic small conflicts. Anduin could see from the Daily Prophet that the war had gradually become white hot. As time was approaching the end of the semester, Anduin was also considering where to spend the holidays. For some reason, Cyrus had been wandering around. It seemed that many Death Eaters had targeted him, and the Potters seemed to have disappeared. Anduin could not contact them at all. Does it mean that I can only go back to the Leaky Cauldron during the summer vacation? But given the current situation, Diagon Alley is not very safe. Anduin was very distressed about the summer vacation arrangements. He planned to ask Professor McGonagall in a few days whether he could stay in school during the summer vacation. However, the arrival of a letter made him cancel this arrangement. It was a letter from Augusta Longbottom. Anduin remembered this strict and kind old lady very well. In the letter, Augusta invited Anduin to visit her home and said that it would be better if he could stay at her place for a while. Anduin saw that it seemed good to spend the summer vacation at the Longbottom family. Anduin immediately wrote back to old Mrs. Longbottom, expressing his gratitude for her invitation and that he would be happy to spend the holiday at her place. Augusta's reply was quick. She happily welcomed him and told Anduin her address. Since she had to take care of little Neville alone, and the Longbottoms both had to work at the Ministry of Magic, Anduin needed to go to the Longbottom family by himself. After deciding where to go for the holiday, Anduin began to prepare gifts for the visit. After all, it was not polite to come empty-handed. Anduin spent 50 gold galleons and asked Hagrid to help him buy a whole T-boat hog ham and 2 bottles of Ogden-aged fire whiskey. He also took out 4 bottles of joy potions that he had left before, wrapped them in gift boxes, and prepared them as gifts for the visit. The boring time always passed quickly, and the second half of the school year soon came to an end. Anduin got 5 excellent and 2 good grades in the 7 courses in the final exam. The 2 courses that did not reach excellent were History of Magic and Astronomy. Anduin basically just kept up with the progress in these 2 courses, and most of the time was spent practicing spells and studying runes. With Anduin's efforts to give Vivian a week of private tutoring, she finally passed all the courses, and she even got an excellent grade in History of Magic. Sure enough, everyone has their own strengths. As expected, the content of the Transfiguration exam was to transform a mouse into a snuff box, just as Professor McGonagall had revealed. Anduin couldn't understand why someone failed the exam even though they knew the questions in advance. After the final exam, the day before the end of the semester, Hogwarts held a farewell party, which was also the end of term dinner. At the dinner, Professor Dumbledore announced the winner of the House Cup for this school year. As expected, Ravenclaw successfully won the House Cup this year. Slytherin and Gryffindor had been fighting fiercely this school year, and the scores of both sides were almost deducted. Vanessa was very anxious about this, but based on Slytherin's current situation, Anduin estimated that it was very likely that she would not be able to touch the House Cup once in the 7 years she was in school. In this auditorium full of blue flags, Anduin spent his first school year not very peacefully. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novel, as there you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 72 Ottery Street. Catpole. After several hours of bumpy ride, Anduin said goodbye to Vivian and Charles as usual when he got off the steam train, then took out Augusta's letter and checked it. Ottery Street, Catpole. Let's take the night bus. Anduin looked at the address on the letter, thought about it and decided. After leaving the train station, Anduin found a street with few people and raised his wand. Soon, a purple 3-decker bus stopped in front of Anduin in a violent way. Anduin looked at the behemoth in front of him and estimated that this journey would not be very comfortable. At the village of Ottery Street, Catpole, Anduin, who had just got off the bus, was swaying and it took him a long time to find his balance. This journey was really hard for him. The bus was almost running wildly all the way, and it had to brake violently when it arrived at the station. Anduin was a little impressed by the conductor on the bus. He stayed on it all day without vomiting. Following the Longbottom's address, Anduin soon found the place. Anduin, I've been waiting for you. I haven't seen you for half a year since we parted at Christmas. Look at you, your hair has grown long. Augusta, wearing an apron and holding a spoon in one hand, smiled at Anduin who appeared in front of the door. Anduin had never cut his hair this school year. Now his hair was long and shoulder length. Except for the pure black hair color, his style was like Cyrus. I should thank you for your invitation. Cyrus and the Potters are out of contact. If you hadn't taken me in, I would have had to stay in the leaky cauldron this summer. Anduin said to Augusta very sincerely. Look at what you said. You are not only our friend, but also our comrade in arms. Have you forgotten that it wouldn't be too boring to have you accompany me this summer? Don't stand there, come in. Augusta hurriedly pulled Anduin into the house, and as soon as he came in, he smelled a strong fragrance. Wait here for a while. Dinner will be ready soon. Frank and Alice will be back soon. You can accompany Neville for me. I wonder if he still remembers you. After that, Augusta walked into the kitchen quickly. Anduin, smiling and nodding, stayed in the living room, looking at the decoration of the Longbottom family. The house of the Longbottom family is obviously different from that of the Potter family. The interior decoration of the Potter family is warm and simple, while the Longbottom family has a sense of age. The wooden furniture around is heavy and solid, and it looks like it has been passed down for several generations. The carpets and decorations have a clear aristocratic style. There are some landscapes and portraits hanging on the wall. There are some antique utensils in the living room. There are even some small animal specimens in the display cabinet next to it. There is also a precious hat on the hat rack next to it, and a vulture specimen stands on the hat. What a peculiar taste. Anduin thought that this is definitely not Alice's style. Neville was lying bored on the crib next to the fireplace in the hall. Suddenly, a long-haired man's face caught his eye. Startled, Neville was about to cry, but when he found that the face in front of him looked familiar, he stopped crying and stared at Anduin with his big round eyes. Anduin saw that Neville was about to cry after seeing him, and he was a little curious in fear, so he couldn't help but find it funny. So he showed a happy smile on his face, gently pinched Neville's little hand, and said, "Little Neville, do you remember me? We once fought off the Death Eaters together." Neville, who was just a little curious, was frightened by Anduin's teasing and started crying, making Anduin very embarrassed and stiff. Okay, I won't tease you anymore. Why are you crying?" Anduin said to himself helplessly. Neville's crying startled Augusta in the kitchen. The old lady even peeked out from the inner room to take a look. Seeing that Neville was fine, she and Anduin coaxed little Neville and went back to the kitchen to work. Anduin just waited by the side and stared at Neville, not daring to touch him, for fear of scaring him to tears again. After a while, the door opened. It was the Longbottoms who came back. Frank and Alice saw Anduin standing next to Neville and couldn't help but greet him happily. "Anduin, long time no see. My mother said you would come to our house to spend the holidays. I didn't believe it at first. It's great that you can come. Alice and I are busy every day. Now there is finally someone to accompany my mother, so she doesn't nag us every day." Frank stretched and greeted Anduin excitedly, as if he was a savior. "Hello, Frank, Alice, old lady Longbottom is very kind to me, and I am very grateful for your invitation." Anduin greeted the two politely. I just heard someone say something bad about me. Dinner is ready, why are you still here?" Augusta said to the two with a stern face. Okay, I know I was wrong, Mom, don't you see there are guests?" Frank was startled when he heard Augusta's voice, and quickly apologized to his mother, and then turned back and quietly stuck out his tongue at Anduin. Anduin thought this family was very interesting. Augusta was a serious mother, but he could feel her deep love for her family. Just by smelling it, he knew that it was a great dinner. Only with heart can you eat true deliciousness. Anduin had his first meal of summer vacation at the Longbottom family. The dinner was very rich. Seeing Frank and Alice's ease, it should be so rich every day. Augusta ate very quickly. After dinner, she was busy feeding little Neville. It can be seen that she is very concerned about her little grandson. After the dinner, Anduin took out the prepared gifts from the space bag. The Longbottom family was reluctant at first, but at Anduin's insistence, Augusta accepted it and hurriedly took the ham, which was thicker than a cow's leg, to the storage room. Frank also smiled and opened a bottle of Ogden's aged fire whiskey, poured himself a small cup, and secretly tasted it in the living room. Anduin looked at his wretched and frivolous appearance and found it funny. He looked like a naughty child who was afraid of being discovered by his parents for secretly drinking. Anduin and the Longbottom couple returned to the living room. Alice held little Neville, and Frank took a sip of the wine in his glass and chatted happily with Anduin. "So, how do you feel about your first year at Hogwarts? Have you been caught by Professor McGonagall often? I remember that she always liked to make trouble for us and put us in detention," Frank said. Chapter 73 The Longbottom Family. Anduin smiled and said, "Professor McGonagall takes good care of me, but those Gryffindors and Slytherins who make trouble for each other often make the professor angry. Humph, it must be those damn Slytherins who are causing trouble." As he spoke, Frank suddenly realized that Anduin seemed to be in Slytherin as well, and quickly added, "I mean those Slytherins who always brag about the supremacy of pure bloods. Many Slytherins are quite well behaved." Anduin didn't mind and said, "I agree with what you said. There were a few pure blood students who caused trouble for me before, but I easily got rid of them." Frank said excitedly, "Then you can learn from Cyrus and James. They know the hanging bell spell, which can hang people upside down. It was very interesting when we were in school. I'm not that naive. Wouldn't it be better to deal with the enemy cleanly and neatly?" Anduin thought, then he remembered something and said, "He couldn't wait to teach me this spell before. By the way, is Cyrus in trouble? I can't contact him. And Lily and James, the owl I sent, can't find them." Alice and Frank frowned slightly when they heard Anduin's words, and looked at each other. Alice thought for a while and said, "Dumbledore thought Lily and James are in danger now, so he hid them. It's normal that they can't be found. We can't contact them. As for Cyrus, Frank continued, he is hiding now. Many Death Eaters can't find Lily and the others, so they want to find him. They should be trying to learn from him where Lily and the others are hiding. But don't worry, he is not fighting alone. Anduin nodded. It seemed to be similar to what he thought before. Well, it's getting late. You should go and rest. Frank, take Anduin to the guest room, which is at the end of the corridor. I have packed it up in advance. Anduin, you are too polite. I think it will take a month to finish that ham. Augusta put away the ham, tidied up the dining room and kitchen, and came to the living room to say to everyone. After saying that, he raised his nose and sniffed, then said angrily, Frank, you drank alcohol again, didn't you? Don't you know you have to go to work tomorrow? Frank shrank his head, smiled awkwardly, and then quickly pulled Anduin upstairs. Alice was holding Neville and laughing at the side. Augusta was so angry that he couldn't help but glared at her. Anduin lived in the Longbottom family with this family atmosphere. He still maintained a very self-disciplined lifestyle every day, exercised regularly in the morning and evening, studied rooms and practiced brain occlusion at night, and basically spent his daytime working for Augusta. Augusta was a strict woman, but she was very caring towards Anduin, a sensible and self-disciplined young man. Moreover, Anduin was a good cook. The Longbottom couple were both aurors of the Ministry of Magic. They usually left home early and came back late. Now, during the war, they sometimes had to work overtime on patrols and emergency missions. They were very busy, so Anduin was willing to spend time with this lonely old man. Anduin, Frank and Alice will have a day off tomorrow. I plan to invite the neighbors around to visit. I will use the ham you gave me to entertain them. How about cooking ham? Augusta was cooking lunch with Anduin. In the 2 weeks that Anduin lived in the Longbottom family, he showed what good cooking skills were. He cooked different dishes almost every day, so Augusta almost became an assistant. It depends on how many people there are. If there are not many people, I can make some delicate and exquisite dishes, such as boiled cabbage, which can also be sliced and served with salad. Anduin looked at the excited Augusta and answered. I plan to invite more people this time, including the Weasley family who live outside the village. Arthur is a colleague of Frank and his wife Molly is the sister of the Prewett brothers. You have met those two brothers. They have many children. Molly is pregnant now. It is hard to imagine that she has to take care of so many people. There are also that Dibgory family who also work in the Ministry of Magic, and the Xenophilius Lovegood family who is an editor of the Quibbler. That guy is a bit weird, but as a neighbor, it would be embarrassing not to invite them. Augusta counted the names on her fingers. Anduin felt a headache when he heard there were so many people, and most of them were children. After thinking for a while, he said, I see. There are 6 adults and 8 children in total. 2 of them are babies, and the other 6 are under 10 years old. 1 is a pregnant woman. Anduin thought about the personnel composition, then took out a piece of parchment and wrote the menu neatly, saying, since there are pregnant women and children, we can't cook dishes with wine. Children generally prefer fried and sweet and sour flavors, so let's cook some braised pork, sweet and sour pork tenderloin, fried chicken wings and fried squid rings. Anduin scribbled on the paper as he spoke, and continued, as for the ham, I would cut it into small pieces and add it with shrimp, scallops, peas, fresh bamboo shoots, and eggs to make a fried rice. This way, the quantity is large and can be made into a self-service staple food, which is also more convenient. I will also dry cut some ham and add it with salad and cheese as a cold meal. Then I will cut some lean ham and add it with corn to make a ham and corn soup. I also have some dried mushrooms here, so I can make another chicken stewed with mushrooms. There are also some lamb chops in your storage room, which we can also use and make a grilled lamb chops with chopped pistachios. And I will make some sauces and prepare some cucumbers, kelp, and black fungus, and pour them on top to make cold dishes. You can prepare some desserts and bread in case someone doesn't like rice. That should be enough, right? You can set up a long table in the yard, and we will make it a self-service table. They can line up on the side and take whatever they like. This is more suitable for occasions with more children, and it also saves time. What do you think? Augusta was surprised to see Anduin writing and drawing. In a short while, he had prepared the menu, as well as the style of the banquet, etc. He was very thoughtful. She originally just wanted to hear Anduin's suggestions on cooking ham, but he arranged everything. You are very thoughtful. Let's do as you say. I'm suddenly looking forward to tomorrow's lunch. What else could Augusta say? Listening to the menu read by Anduin, not to mention the guests, her saliva was almost flowing. Chapter 74. Naughty Child. After deciding on the menu, Anduin and Augusta began to prepare the ingredients in the afternoon. Augusta also took out some exquisite ceramic tableware, large silverware for the buffet, etc. Early the next morning, Anduin and Augusta began to prepare the ingredients. Augusta kept using cooking magic to mix the dough. She was responsible for cooking the bread, desserts and juice drinks for the lunch later. Anduin controlled 3 cutting boards at the same time, and handled pork, chicken, lamb chops and ham, etc. And classified all the meats, vegetables, seasonings, and ingredients that needed to be used, and prepared them one by one, so that they could be quickly used later. Frank and Alice rarely had a vacation, and they were very excited to hear that they could hold a banquet. They also helped arrange the tables, chairs and dining tables in the yard, and cast spells around, releasing a lot of muggle-repelling spells and shielding spells. Although there were many wizards living in this village, there were also many muggles, and they didn't want to be disturbed. Just as Anduin turned on the 4-burner stove and started cooking dishes that took a lot of time, such as stewed chicken with mushrooms and braised pork, the first guest arrived. The first to arrive were the Didgory family, Amos Didgory and his wife, and their almost 4-year-old child Cedric Didgory. Anduin heard the conversation in the living room, walked to the kitchen door, and looked inside. The Didgory couple looked like an ordinary couple, with a slightly fat body. Cedric stayed honestly beside his parents, but his head was curiously looking around. When he saw Anduin looking at him, his shy little face blushed and he smiled at Anduin. Anduin also smiled back to little Cedric and went back to the kitchen to work. The aroma of the 2 dishes was already overflowing, and Anduin also started to cook several other fried dishes, such as sweet and sour pork tenderloin, fried chicken wings and onion rings, etc. At this time, the second wave of guests from the Longbottom family arrived. The living room was like walking into a vegetable market, and suddenly it became noisy, with a bunch of children shouting and making noises. Anduin guessed that it should be the Weasley family, but Anduin was frying things, so he didn't go to the door to check. Who knew that he didn't go out, but someone broke in. I saw a pair of twin children who looked 3 or 4 years old, with fiery red hair, running into the kitchen, shouting and yelling as they ran. Anduin couldn't stand the naughty children making trouble, and he was operating the oil pan, and he didn't want the hot oil to splash on the children, otherwise he would have a hard time explaining it. But the 2 naughty children seemed to have heard his thoughts and rushed straight to him. "Ah, it smells so good, George, do you want to smell it?" "You're George, I'm Fred, idiot." The 2 naughty kids ran to Anduin's feet, and kept tiptoeing to see the scenery on the stove. "Don't stay here, you'll get burned soon. You can taste the delicious food when the meal is ready." Anduin couldn't stand the 2 guys running around at his feet, so he had to find a way to drive them away. "I don't, you are just a little taller than my big brother, why should I listen to you?" one of the naughty kids said in a baby voice. "That's right, unless you carry me up to see what smells so good, it smells better than the food my mother cooks." The other naughty kid also chimed in. "You are talking nonsense, no one can cook more fragrant than my mother, your nose must be broken." Before Anduin could answer, the child who spoke earlier interrupted his little brother's words. "Your nose is broken, not only your nose is broken, but your ears are also broken." The scolded naughty child retorted unconvinced. As a result, before Anduin could get angry, the 2 brats started to quarrel. Not only quarreling, but also looking like they were going to fight. When Anduin was annoyed by these 2 guys, another child came in. He had the same red hair and looked 2 or 3 years older than the 2 twins. He was also much more gentle than the 2 brats. "George, Fred, Mom is calling you to go out. Don't bother others here." Their brother scolded. Anduin saw that someone finally came to save him, and he said thank God. "Lulu." The 2 brats stuck out their tongues at their brother and shouted in unison. "No, crybaby Percy, come and chase us." The twin brats ignored their brother and circled around the marble counter in the middle of the kitchen. Percy was so angry with the 2 guys that he also chased them. Anduin, who was standing aside, saw that these brats didn't take him seriously at all, and his anger value rose up. But just when he was about to lose his temper, he was interrupted by another person who came in. This guy looked much older than the 3 kids in the kitchen, about 10 years old, with the same fiery red hair, but he looked much more stable. Percy saw his eldest brother coming and immediately shouted in grievance, "Bill, look at them, they are not obedient at all and they scold me." "Nonsense, you were mean to us first," and Percy just complained. The twins retorted in unison. Bill came in and picked up the 2 naughty kids in 2 steps. He didn't talk to them, but said to Anduin embarrassedly, "Sorry, my brothers disturbed you." Anduin saw that someone finally came to deal with these guys, so he said, "It's nothing, but it's dangerous in the kitchen. It's better not to let them run around here, they will get hurt easily." Bill nodded to Anduin with a little apology, then glanced at George and Fred, and dragged the two out regardless of their shouting. The world was finally quiet, and Anduin was relieved. However, he also saw how chaotic a family with many children was. These kids had all kinds of personalities. He really admired the Weasleys who could manage such a large family. After returning to peace, Anduin finally calmed down and cooked most of the food. Augusta, who had gone out to entertain the guests, also returned to the kitchen to check the desserts in the oven. At this time, the last wave of guests finally arrived. Anduin, who was almost busy, also walked to the kitchen door to see what the Lovegood family, which Augusta described as strange, was like. Mr. Xenophilius Lovegood looked like an artist, with fluffy white hair draped over his shoulders, wearing a bright yellow robe, and a gold chain around his neck with a triangular accessory hanging on it. Mrs. Lovegood was holding a baby and wearing a light blue robe, looking very scholarly. Chapter 75 Lunch. These two are obviously Ravensslaws, Anduin thought silently. No wonder Augusta would have such an evaluation. Ravensslaws sometimes behave a little self-centered, and some people even call them weird. Anduin had a good impression of the two. After all, he had thought that he would be assigned to Ravenslaw before, because he also had a lot of scholarly aura. The Longbottom couple kept greeting everyone and invited everyone to rest in the courtyard. The weather was good that day, with a rare sunny day. Everyone was drinking drinks in the courtyard and constantly chatting about topics of interest. A group of children were also playing with each other, a happy scene. In the kitchen, Anduin wiped his sweat and finally prepared all the food. He used magic to control all the food and put it into the prepared large porcelain tableware. Then all the tableware floated in a row and followed Anduin in an orderly manner. When he came to the courtyard, Anduin controlled all the tableware and dropped it into the metal vehicle on the dining table, and then covered it one by one. Everything was ready. Augusta, who was sitting at the long dining table, knocked on the wine glass and said, "Welcome everyone to the Longbottom family party today, and thank Anduin for serving us so many delicious foods. Now let's enjoy lunch together. Don't be shy about what you want to eat." If Anduin were to sum up Augusta's words, it would be to eat well and drink well, and make as much as you want. Augusta brought the family banquet to a climax. All the naughty children rushed to the dining table at the first time. Anduin looked at these red-haired kids and couldn't help but feel funny. A wealthy pregnant woman next to him walked up to him and said, "Anduin, I heard my two brothers mention you. I didn't expect you to have such good cooking skills. I smelled the aroma from the kitchen as soon as I entered the door." "You're welcome, Mrs. Weasley. I think you are really amazing. You can take care of such a big family." Anduin said politely. "Just call me Molly. You don't know how much effort it takes to cook for so many people every day," Molly Weasley said. Arthur Weasley, who was holding a child who was about the same age as Neville, also interrupted and said, "Anduin, although this is the first time we meet, I have heard of you from Moody and Kingsley. I heard that you helped them fight off the Death Eaters. Is this true?" The couple's concerns were completely different. Anduin could only talk to them one sentence after another, and he couldn't help but have a headache. The children had also finished their meals, and each of them walked to the long table with a slow plate. Anduin said to the Weasleys, "You two should take some food first, and we will talk while we eat." The Weasleys readily agreed. Arthur entrusted Ron, who was more than 1 year old, to Anduin to take care of him, and he touched his belly and happily picked out the food. Anduin held the little red-haired Ron. Little Ron looked well-nourished since he was a child, and his body was very strong, but his expression looked silly, not very smart. The guests of the Longbottom family sat around the long table, happily tasting the food on the plate. The Diggories always looked cheerful, while the Lovegoods were a little reserved and didn't seem to be very sociable. They didn't have much to say about the topic. The Weasleys were lively. Arthur tasted the food with a smile. Molly had to look after the children while eating. However, his eldest son Bill and second son Charlie could help her a little. It was just that the twin brothers were restless. But everyone had one thing in common, that is, all the guests were amazed at the food, including all the children. Several children ate until their faces were covered with grease, including the shy Cedric. After learning that almost all the food was made by Anduin, everyone was generous with their praise and greeted Anduin one after another. "So, how is this chicken mushroom soup made?" It smells good and tastes even better. Molly was amazed after tasting Anduin's cooking skills. It was a brand new taste she had never tasted before, and there was no taste of cheese and butter at all, so she kept asking Anduin for the recipe. Anduin humbly exchanged cooking skills with Mrs. Weasley. After a while, Molly and Anduin were like good friends who had known each other for a long time. "Brother Anduin, can you come to my house often? When you come to our house, cook for us." Charlie Weasley, who was 8 years old, said innocently, holding a chicken wing in his hands. "Of course there is no problem if there is a chance, as long as you don't mind," Anduin said frankly. "Really? Our family welcomes you very much," Arthur, who was eating with a mouthful of oil, said excitedly. In this way, Anduin and the Weasley family formed a friendship because of food. The lunch was a scene of great joy for both the host and the guests. After lunch, everyone gathered together for afternoon tea, and the children were playing in the courtyard. Mr. Lovegood came to Anduin and said, "Young man, thank you for your hospitality. My wife is very happy today. Even Luna can feel her mother's mood, so she is smiling all the time." Anduin smiled and said, "You are too polite, Mr. Lovegood. I am very happy that you like these foods. We all like it very much, and Luna likes it too. Although she can't eat it now, you can see that she likes it very much," Lovegood said. Although he didn't know how he came to the conclusion, Anduin still said politely, "I'm glad that your daughter likes it. I heard that you are the editor of a magazine. I guess you work very hard." Lovegood was very excited when he heard Anduin say that. He said, "Yes, have you heard of the magazine The Quibbler? They are the only magazine willing to publish articles about Scimitar Snorkel, as well as Hook and Shiver and Maggot. Other magazines only hide the truth. They are all made up of a bunch of liars." Anduin was shocked to see him so blatantly criticize his peers. Anduin found that Mr. Lovegood spoke very directly and had no idea what euphemism meant. "I hope you are not troubled by the harassment flies. Pandora is calling me. Forgive me for a while. Maybe one day you can publish some recipes in our magazine. I believe it will be very popular." Lovegood smiled and said to Anduin, then got up and left. Anduin didn't quite understand what Mr. Lovegood said, but he could tell that he was not a bad person, just that his thinking was not on the same level as others. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.